What's going on, everybody? Hey, normal little day, normal little Friday we have going here. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive presented by Yahoo. I'm Eric Lindquist. Very excited to be here chatting a little NBA action. The NBA action that we know is going to be happening tonight. People in the chat saying they think the games are going to be postponed. Well, there's one that we're really going to be paying very close attention to in that evening window. But as it stands right now, looks like we've got 8 games here on the board. We're going to go through all of them, talk about all the information that we have. I can't remember a slate quite like this. I did a Yahoo NFL show earlier where all of a sudden things are getting moved to Tuesday. Cooper Kupp isn't on the main slate. Madness is happening there. And simultaneously, the NBA is burning down. But luckily, we've got just the guy here to help you guys out, figure out what we need to do. That's Adam Scherer at Ship My Money DFS on the Twitter sphere. Adam, how's this relaxing little Friday going for you?
It's good, man. I love slates where everything that I do is erased 5 minutes later.
It's really fun. Hey, I will say you were saying this before the show, and I think it's true, but you know, we do want to buckle down on some of these slates because the edges are ginormous because people aren't going to be paying attention to news. Projections are going to be crazy. People don't understand range of outcomes, but out of everything that you're looking at here on the board, what do you find to be the most important pieces of news that we are still waiting on? Everything?
Yeah, I mean, exactly who is available for Orlando. They signed 4 guys to 10-day contracts. I don't know if that means that they are all like, we're just all sitting in the building waiting for Mo Bamba to get ruled out and then they sign their deals or what. But exactly how many bodies Orlando has is a huge deal here. Clint Capella, I mean, from just like a normal standpoint, he's sick, may or may not play. That's a pretty big deal though. The Kings, if they're going to play, who's on their team? We got Davion Mitchell confirmed out right before the show started. So who the hell knows what's going on there? I guess those are the 3 biggest, but I mean, just a ton of moving parts still.
Ton of moving parts. We're going to just be reacting to everything in real time. So bear with us because we're going to do the absolute best we can to give you the most accurate, updated information. If I misspeak and say somebody's out as opposed to health and safety protocols, don't spam the chat. I promise you, I will find it corrected. I've got Tyler Zander there behind the virtual glass helping out. We've got the injury report that we now have the screen that we can kind of refer to. We go back and forth and we try to make sense of the madness. But as you guys are all getting in here, hit that like button and that subscribe button, notification bell, because Adam is about to lead you guys through the fires of hell. I'm excited to get going. You ready to ride into this slate, my dude?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Right off the bat, Miami and Orlando seems like a pretty fascinating spot to be talking about. You alluded to it on the onset of the slate. Miami currently 7.5-point favorites. That line has just continued to inflate. We got news Mo Bamba's out. We got news that a million guys are going to be out from the Orlando side. But let's start with Miami, where we know that Tyler Hero is still questionable. He didn't participate in shoot around this morning. I'm going as if he's not going to play here in this spot. Do you have any kind of a lean there? And in the context of the slate, does it even matter?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that he doesn't play just because he didn't go through shoot around. Also, I doubt that there's any real, urgency to rush him back against the Orlando Magic and a bunch of dudes they just signed to contracts that, weren't even in the NBA. So I'm assuming he doesn't play until we hear that he is. I think it matters in the sense that, for one, if he did play, he actually looked pretty good at a cheap price tag. But 2, it does help to solidify minutes for guys like Gabe Vincent, potentially Duncan Robinson. It makes these guys look a little bit better. But in the context of the entire slate, Miami's still, as weird as it is, pretty far from being the most shorthanded team.
Which is absurd because Jimmy Butler's out. Bam Adebayo's out. Tyler Hero questionable. Victor Oladipo's been out since 1994. Caleb Martin is out. Markieff Morris is out. Yurtseven's out. Or no, Yurtseven is questionable for Friday. So if you guys want to try to figure out a Dwayne Dedman situation and figure out what's going on with those minutes, be my guest. I think at 5K, he is projecting out decent enough for us here. Kyle Lowry at 7,800. That price has now come down from 8,100 on the last slate here. 7,800. He just got done burning everybody and their dog, but less of a priority. Thank God here on this slate. I think he's got some upside, but I think out of anybody here on this team, Dwayne Dedman, if we can get those minutes right ever, there's 40 plus upside there. Are you willing to roll the dice with him tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good salary. I think it's a good spot. Orlando for sure is a good matchup. Dedman, if he can stay out of foul trouble, can certainly give you, 26 plus minutes. He played 32 against Philadelphia last time out. He's about a fantasy point per minute guy. The only real concern I have with Dedman, outside of the fact that, his playing time typically is all over the place, is that their center is really tough tonight. You have some decent value options. In particular, DeMarcus Cousins is sitting at 3,100 on DraftKings, but then you also have some sort of underpriced mid-range guys. Clint Capella, if he plays, Joe Val in a ridiculous spot that we'll talk about, yet Jokic at the top. So the opportunity cost is as high as ever, but Dedmon at 5K, I think does look pretty good.
All right. And I mean, is there anything else even to talk about from Miami? They are far from a priority on this slate.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lowry, particularly 7,800 on DraftKings is fine. 7K on FanDuel stands out. He is getting quite a bit of ownership there, or at least he was this morning. I'm refreshing now. But especially if Hero's out, you can expect more usage for him.
Yeah, 31.4% it looks like on FanDuel right now. So second, going to be the most popular guard.
Yeah, I have 30% now, unless it just updated.
Okay.
But so he has like a 23.5% usage rate without Hero, Butler, or Bam on the floor this year. So he looks good. Assist percentage is high as well. He looks good, but there's a million really good guard plays tonight.
Yeah, a million of them. Yeah, 7,800. I'm still going to probably take some shots over on DK, but again, it's going to be Kyle Lowry, the dice roll of one Dwayne Dedmon, and moving on with our lives. All right, I've got a headache already because this is one of the teams that we have to do some crazy assumptions for here. Cole Anthony is questionable. He is a guy that we're waiting on news for. Terrence Ross is out. RJ Hampton is out. We have Gary Harris out. Or Gary Harris is available. He's possible of being in. He's questionable. We have Mo Bamba, who's now out. It was originally for injury. Now it's safety protocols. Jalen Suggs, all those guys, Markel Fultz, Michael Carter-Williams, Jonathan Isaac, Etuan Moore have been out forever. What is your initial impression of what we're supposed to do here with this Orlando team?
So I don't know who exactly is on this team at this point.
That's a great start.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find the tweet of who they signed. I know they signed like 4 guys. So they signed Aleem Ford, Hassani Gravett, BJ Johnson, and Admiral Schofield. I've heard of 2 of those guys. I've heard of BJ Johnson. I've heard of Admiral Schofield. I have no idea who the other 2 guys are. I don't know if they're all available. I assume, at least one of them has to be. But this looks like a team where the active players have to play a lot, assuming that the 10-day guys aren't just going to come in and play, 18 minutes or 20 minutes right out of the gate, assuming it's going to be more like we saw with Langston Galloway yesterday, where he's kind of just, soaking up a few minutes so guys don't have to play 40. Cole Anthony should play a ton here. He's relatively inexpensive for the amount of minutes he's likely to play and the fact that he has close to a 30% usage rate without Suggs. Wendell Carter should play a lot, should get plenty of rebounding opportunities with Bamba out. Franz Wagner probably plays like every minute of the game or close to it. Chuma Okiki probably plays a ton at 3,600. He's not a great fantasy, point per dollar guy, but it's hard to see him not playing a ton of minutes tonight. Like if Gary Harris is in, I doubt that they're going to try and go more than his normal amount of minutes just because it's Gary Harris. Okiki is someone that, they certainly would like to get some NBA minutes. He is younger. He's healthy. I would expect he plays a ton. So it does depend, exactly how many of these guys are available tonight. If we get any word about, 1 or 2 of them are available, but only in emergencies, that would change things. But I expect Anthony to play a ton. I expect Carter to play a lot. I think Wagner plays a ton. I think Okiki plays a ton.
Got it. So also from the bigs here for Orlando, we have so many centers that are at 3K, 3,100. We'll get to Cousins, Damian Jones, even Tristan Thompson, more expensive, and his Freedom. That's fun to say now. 3,100 for him. A number of those guys. Robin Lopez, he's a guy who could play a sneaky amount of minutes. He's been useful here. If somebody doesn't have necessarily 25 plus point upside, though, it's hard to really roster them. But I guess if he's going to be sub 5%, we just could see a crazy allotment of minutes for all these guys that have been in the rotation period. And Robin Lopez has played upwards of 31 minutes in his one start that he had this season. Is he somebody that's on your board at all?
Lopez?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
It depends on exactly how many guys are available. Like if they actually have 12 guys and they don't have to give Lopez a ton of minutes at 3,100, it's okay. But if they only have, let's say that they just say, okay, like these 10-day contracts, let's say, Gary Harris is in, and then that, the 10-day contracts are going to be limited, then you're likely to see more minutes from Lopez. So the fact that there's so many other good centers makes it tough to go there, but I think there is a decent chance that he, gets low to mid 20s.
Okay. Well, I'm just, everybody's on the board here, and it's really, really going to come down to how many guys end up active. I mean, if you have that 8, 9, 10 number, we know what to kind of do in those situations. If it ends up being 12, you're right. There's just such a large range of outcomes for what these minutes could look like for certain guys. Orlando is not exactly in win now mode. I would say that that's probably a fair assessment of the team. So is there going to be something where you just kind of want to get that starting lineup and react accordingly?
Yeah, I think so. Because obviously Gary Harris is a big question mark, but I assume that you're going to get Cole Anthony, Wendell Carter Jr., Franz Wagner. Those guys are starting, barring them getting ruled out between now and lock. So then Gary Harris, if he's available, I assume would start. Chuma Okiki, I think, starts one way or the other. If Harris is in, Okiki probably starts just like he did last game in place of Bamba alongside Wendell Carter Jr. If Harris is out, Okiki's in the starting lineup, and then it's a matter of Robin Lopez would probably be the next guy up. You'd probably just get the Carter and Lopez front court with Anthony, Wagner, Okiki would be my guess. You could get a Michael Mulder spot start. So yeah, the starting lineup is going to make a difference here. But at the same time, I think it probably only really impacts how I feel about Robin Lopez and then Gary Harris, in the sense that if Gary Harris isn't starting, I assume he's not playing.
Favorite 3 plays from Orlando without knowing that starting lineup?
Anthony, Carter, factoring in salary, Anthony, Carter, Okiki.
Okay. So the 3 kind of core guys that I feel pretty confident about as well. So makes some sense. Franz Wagner, you're looking more of it a dart throw, but he's expensive. I mean, really expensive now.
Thing. I feel very good about his minutes. I just don't feel great about what he does with those minutes.
All right. Well, obviously we have live before lock coming up here after the show. We could go for 20 minutes talking about scenarios here. A lot of hypotheticals. You'll get that starting lineup. It's that first game that's going to lock here of the night. It's a huge important one. Everybody's like, "Why? We just move on." No, we got to talk about those ones because those are gigantic pieces here of the slate. But we got to move along. Golden State -4 at Boston, 216.5 total here in this one. A lot of news that kind of randomly came in from the Boston side here, but Golden State. When you want to talk about a team that's running pretty well here, it looks like everybody's going to be good to go outside of Jordan Poole here in this spot. So continue to kind of plan accordingly there. We know that there's upside that exists for Steph Curry, but 11-3 on this slate. Mia, without Poole in there, is there some kind of a reason you might be looking to his upside, considering he's sub 10% right now?
So he actually has seen a huge bump without Jordan Poole on the floor this year. I was kind of surprised. My expectation was that you'd see an increase in usage for Wiggins and that Curry maybe would get a point or two, but Curry typically is, getting the shots that he wants anyway. But without Poole on the floor this year, he's got about a 35 to 36% usage rate. Without Poole on the floor, he's at about 31%. Even if you put Wiggins on and take Poole off, Curry goes to 37%. So you have actually seen a bump in his usage without Jordan Poole. It does make him look a little bit better, but on DraftKings, I think it's still tough to get there at 11-3. I mean, there's plenty of value on the slate, but you also have Jokic, who, regardless of who's playing for Golden State, Jokic just projects better than Curry. So the only real argument I could make for Curry is that he does see a usage bump and he's not getting much ownership, like you said. On FanDuel, the scoring is not as favorable for Curry, but he's only 9,900. So I think he looks pretty good there. I like getting to him there. Beyond that, with Golden State, I think it's just kind of some secondary plays. Draymond looks fine. Wiggins looks fine. Kevon Looney's been playing mid-20s in minutes. He's 3,400, certainly a reasonable dart throw type play. Amongst the other guys, I'm assuming Damian Lee starts. If he does, he projects as a decent point per dollar value at 3,500. Still someone to be, pretty difficult to get excited about, though, given that he's not a very good fantasy producer, and putting him alongside Steph Curry is not going to do him any favors. Oh,
that was such a concise job. Way to go by you, because we got so much stuff to talk about here later, such as this other side of the game, Boston here. Al Horford out, Grant Williams out, Jabari Parker out, Juancho Hernangomez out. So there's basically going to be something to the likes of, a ton of minutes. They're going to be available for the likes of Robert Williams, Ennis Freedom. They can do some other things, I suppose, here. Bruno Fernando, that's going to be something that maybe actually matters that he's questionable. Am I looking at this correct?
I mean, I think they just play Jason Tatum at center.
Oh, that's going to be so fun to watch. All right. So Jason Tatum, he's somebody that just really, really sticks out for me on this slate. Obviously 18% rostership at the moment, 9K for him over on DK, but absent all these other scores here. I mean, yeah, Marcus Smart, Josh Richardson, Dennis Schroeder still on the floor, but I mean, it's going to be the Jason Tatum show. If he starts here at the 5, how much do you like him on this? I don't think
he starts at the 5. I think he plays the 5.
Or he plays some 5. Okay. So Robert Williams is going to start at the 5.
That's my assumption. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, that makes way more sense. But go ahead and give me the pitch on the Boston side. And how much do you like Jason Tatum on this slate?
I like Jason Tatum quite a bit. Liked him anyway at 9K on DraftKings. Just a pretty solid salary. Even with Jaylen Brown back, you still are looking at someone with about a 31% usage rate. He's likely to play 37 or 38 minutes, assuming this game's competitive. He's getting 18% ownership, really the only guy on DraftKings getting ownership right now. And I think that makes sense. You know, it's a tough matchup in terms of Golden State being a good defensive team, but they also play at a fast pace. If Tatum does get minutes at the 5, as I expect him to, the rebounding numbers should increase as well, which makes him look even more appealing. So I think he looks good, but I also don't mind going to some of these other Boston guys. On FanDuel, Jaylen Brown's pretty fairly priced. On DraftKings, I have a really difficult time getting there. But Dennis Schroeder at 6,100, I'm expecting him to slide into the starting lineup in place of Horford since Grant Williams is also out. I think you get a lot of playing time from him. I think you get 36 minutes or so from Marcus Smart. And then Robert Williams, I don't really have a good feel for how many minutes he plays since this is a matchup with Golden State, but I think it's likely he gets at least 24 to 26 minutes. He produces at a higher rate without Al Horford on the floor. At 4,800 and not much ownership, it makes him look pretty appealing to me. I don't see a whole lot else from Boston. Like Josh Richardson probably plays mid-20s. I don't think Enes Kanter plays a lot. If I'm wrong, he ends up being a really good play. You know, so that's the spot where, like, if you disagree with me for some reason, not saying like you shouldn't disagree with me, but like if you have a reason that you think Enes Kanter plays, go ahead and play him. Like, he's 3,100. The minutes are there if Boston wants to go that route. I just am expecting that you get Robert Williams basically out there with Kevon Looney, maybe an extra couple of minutes, and then you get Tatum probably playing against Draymond Green essentially. So that's my expectation. But if Kanter does somehow get 14, 16 minutes, he looks like a good value. But since I'm not expecting that, I'm not playing him. I don't think Langford is a good enough fantasy option to get to. So it's pretty much the starters for me.
It's such a volatile play. I mean, you have so many guys that are at that 3K 3,100 number at center, but I thought I would bring him up simply because if you put him in for 20 minutes, can he go there at a 1.1 fantasy point per minute rate? He absolutely can. So somebody to throw in there. He's played some random minutes, but that was Portland. I mean, Portland, it's basically, having a backup of Rob Covington there in some spots, but he played 22 minutes in that game on the 4th of December. Just wanted to at least bring him up because it's somebody that we were giving 17 and a half minutes to here at Awesemo. I think that might be a little bit on the high end. I'm probably more with you, but in the event he plays 20 minutes, he's certainly viable on any slate at 3,100. And so at least if you want to get really, really different in a large field tournament, something that could come to fruition. A lot of unknowns.
For what it's worth, in that Portland game, most of those minutes were against Nurkic. Williams was in foul trouble early in the first half, early in the second half. So Enes Freedom subbed in early and basically was just playing against Yusuf Nurkic.
I last watched the NBA in 1998. That seems incorrect. That just feels kind of wrong. I mean, I watched it last night. That's right. I watched some Brooklyn debacle, and oh my God, the Brooklyn slate tomorrow is going to be incredible. Anything else from this game for you?
Stephen Leibowitz said Enes Kanter has been playing more lately. He played, I think, 3 minutes in their last game.
Yeah, he literally has not played like the last 3. He played 22 minutes on the 4th.
Yeah, that was the one where Williams was in foul trouble.
Yep.
So they
it was a I want to go up against Nurkic. I used to play for Portland kind of situation. Like I don't know. I could see why he got some extra leash.
It was a revenge spot where he paid off the refs to call fouls on Robert Williams.
I love narratives. You know what? Let's throw this in here quick because we're 20 minutes into the program. We'll get moving here, but it is bowl season, y'all. It's bowl season. You need to be checking out some of the college football content that we have for Matt Gajewski. Ben Ross are doing a great job. I know that they did some coverage for everything here earlier in the day. Go back and watch that show. But bowl season right now is the promo code you want to use for 50% off the college football DFS projections. And that means it's $25 instead of the $50 that you normally be paying for it. So bowl season, $24.98. You'll get awesemo.com/promos. Use this college football promotion. I love some of these confidence pools. I love playing DFS for college football. If you do too, check out this promotion. That is promo code bowl season. It's valid now through Wednesday, December 22nd, but Why wouldn't you just use it now? Utilize that here now. Stop guessing, start winning. All right, we got another game here in this early window, locking at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. That is Denver and Atlanta. Starting with the Denver side here, there's no doubt about it. Nikola Jokic is a psycho human being who's over a 1.8 fantasy point per minute guy. And on any slate, he's an absolute smash for raw points, it feels like. But at 12K and a number of really, really cheap centers here, we're seeing some lower ownership than what you would expect on an 8-game slate with tons of value. Right now, around 20% over on DK. How much are you prioritizing him considering the decreased amount of ownership that exists because of the likes of Boogie, Damian Jones, and a lot of other guys at center?
I mean, I love him. I love Jokic every time he plays. The opportunity cost is high because there are so many good options, but that also just drives down the ownership a little bit. There's plenty of value at other positions, and you're basically just starting off with 60 plus DraftKings points. He essentially on this slate, there's nobody that is remotely close from a points per minute standpoint. So basically you're just getting a guy in Jokic who his median projection is like the realistic ceiling for most other players, if not higher than their realistic ceiling. So it's clearly a very good spot to get to. The ownership, he's getting some ownership, but I think that I still just want to get to more of him.
Okay. It's just, I love it too. I mean, we look at just his, if we look at the projections, I mean, he's projected for 10 more raw points than anybody else here on the slate, more so than Steph Curry. Now we have Russell Westbrook in the fray. That's going to just put another wrench into that Lakers. I thought I would be getting to more LeBron James and a 9,400 Anthony Davis, but now they're not exactly priorities for me here either with Westbrook back. So Nikola Jokic, I just think at 20%, that feels low. I would be well over top of such a thing. And you can play two centers on a site like DraftKings or DraftKings or Yahoo, as opposed to on FanDuel where you're just picking out one. But still, why wouldn't you want 60 raw points in your lineup? Seems like a good deal. Anything else for you from Denver? Feels a little bit thin. We have Austin Rivers that is somebody that I think is projected to return now from health and safety protocols. So he can absorb some minutes, can kind of detract away from guys like Bones Highland, who might have been pieces of value on a different slate. But anything else for you from Denver?
No, just tough to get to anything else here. I mean, there's so many good plays on this slate.
All right. And then Atlanta, of course, Clint Capella, massive piece of news that we're waiting on here. As soon as that were to come through, he's sick. He's got a rumbly in his tumbly or something of the sort, not COVID related. So if he's good to go, he can fire it up 7,400. That becomes a little unappealing still regardless on this slate. But if he's out, how much John Collins could you see yourself getting on this slate?
I'm curious to see what they do, what the starting lineup is if Capella's out, because you do have the matchup with Jokic. I don't know if they would go to Gorgie Jang to start and, hope that works out, but it would make Collins look better regardless. You would assume that he at least is getting like backup center minutes. Kongwu is also probable to play, though he'll be on a minutes limit. But if Capella were out, there should be at least some minutes at the 5 available for Collins. I think he looks pretty good at 6,800 anyway, but he'll look even better if Capella's out.
Definitely. And Trae Young, definitely somebody who's been performing, had a little bit more ceiling in mind, it would seem, of lately. I mean, we're seeing some usage up around 40% in some of these games, 43.2, 40.9, 38.4, his last three out. He is out there chucking. He's out there scoring. No Clint Capella on the floor. I mean, I don't think that's really going to matter from him, going out and chucking. But how do you kind of rank Trae Young amongst all of these studs?
He's fine. He has been playing well, like you said. I think he's a little bit underpriced at 10-2. It's also not a matchup I love. Denver is a pretty slow team, but Atlanta has a 114 implied total here. It should be a high scoring game. So I think Trae Young looks like a pretty solid option.
All right. Anything else from this game?
Capella, if he plays in tournaments, I like. He's not projected for much ownership. We know the opportunity cost is high, but he's only 7,400 on DraftKings. He's projected for 1% ownership. If he's able to go, I would expect Atlanta to want him on the floor quite a bit to try and deal with Jokic. And he's averaged about 1.14 DraftKings points per minute this year. So I think he looks like a pretty good option.
Thank you so much to Miami. Mike 305 for the $10 super chat. I'm going to save Adam from any of my bits today. I don't think he's in the mood for it. I don't think. Are you here for bits from Eric Lindquist today? You're not?
Go for it.
Hello, Adam. Welcome to the craziest NBA slate of your life. I'm Jigsaw from the movie Saw. I'm telling you right now. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, stop it, Tyler Xander. You just said it was good. That wasn't bad. Idiot. Kevin Diaz, $4.99. Thank you as much. There's a lot going on. So we're going to go back to basketball. I don't really think we have time for I don't have time for myself today is probably the right way of saying it. Let's head over to Milwaukee at New Orleans. Milwaukee still 2-point favorites here in New Orleans. No Giannis Antetokounmpo seems like a big deal. We should probably be discussing Jrue Holiday coming off of his massive 55-point fantasy point outing. Double-double, just an absolute thrashing here. 20% rostership we're looking at on DK here right now. He's sub 8K. What else can you say? Jrue Holiday just looks like a phenomenal play on this slate, no?
Yeah, he looks really good. Middleton is probable, so that knocks Holiday down a bit from where he was last slate. But we have 10 games since the start of last season where Giannis has been out with Middleton and Holiday active. Holiday and Middleton both have averaged about 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. You should get 35 minutes from Holiday. You should get 35 minutes from Middleton. Makes them both look really, really good. New Orleans is a really bad team. They suck defensively. Plenty of opportunities available for Holiday.
Oh, boomy. That's not very nice. Yeah, Chris Middleton. So where does Chris Middleton look like on this? I mean, he's just phenomenally owned here over on DK, but he's 6,700. You don't have any kind of concerns. Holy shit, Dennis Schroeder just got ruled out.
All right. Well, I mean, eventually Cantor is going to play center just because they run out of guys.
I was going to say, you're going to be wrong, but it's not going to be your fault. We'll go back to that here in a second. Let's round out Milwaukee. And then I think we got to rehash that because that's another massive piece to be losing here, just in the context of this slate. Sure, Golden State, whatever. Boston just has so many guys out. From the Milwaukee side here, Chris Middleton on this slate, 6,700. It's hard to look at the boom bust tool and like take anything seriously today because there's so many moving parts and I don't really know what else to say. Sam Hauser got ruled out.
He's on Boston, I think, right?
Yeah, I was going to say he's somebody that exists in the world. I said his name for a second because I think he was on Boston. So, I mean, maybe another guy that just can't play minutes now there for them. We'll rehash that here in a second, but talk to me about Chris Middleton, who I think sticks out, but we've seen some volatility here in the absence of Giannis.
Yeah, we have, but he's only 6,700. He's only getting 30% ownership, which I mean, yeah, it's a decent amount, but it's not like it's crazy. The matchup's really good. Like I said before, 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. He only missed one game with the injury, so I'm not expecting him to be limited. Just kind of looks like a completely mispriced option.
Yeah, it's just absurd what's going on here. We're gonna keep this thing on the tracks here, Milwaukee. Anybody else here from you? Because obviously, oh yeah, that's right. DeMarcus Cousins is back. DeMarcus Cousins is in our life because Bobby Portis is out. And I talked about him last night on the Slate Starter Pod. It was just absolutely beautiful. Cole Anthony just got rolled out too. Fuck. What in the hell do we do today, Adam? What do we do with our lives? What do we do? Oh.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Is a good person. Happy Christmas, everyone.
As far as Cousins goes, he's obviously a good point per dollar value, assuming he starts and plays Portis. The big question is how many minutes does he play? He hasn't played more than 18 minutes in a game this year. Even if he plays like 18 to 20 minutes, he's going to project as a good option at 3,100. He could potentially play more. Like, I don't know what his conditioning level is. So he looks really good. He's getting 30% ownership. The only like kind of concern that I have, other than, that I don't know how many minutes he can play, I assume he's going to just get absolutely wrecked by Jonas Valanciunas. I don't think that Milwaukee has any sort of answer for the Pelicans centers, whether they play a big or not. So the kind of concern that I'd mentioned with Josh this morning is, what if we see Milwaukee just say screw it and play like 5 wings and basically accept that Joe Val is going to destroy them, but potentially make it so the Pelicans have to get Joe Val off the floor. I'm not super confident that happens. I'm not saying like I'm not playing Cousins because I think that's super likely or anything, but that is, I think, the most obvious path to disappointment for Cousins is that Milwaukee just says like, okay, this guy's getting embarrassed. Mamukelashvili is not the answer either. Let's just have 5 guys hanging out at the 3-point line.
So do you think I can't even right now. Mamukashvili, do you think that he could end up being the guy starting? Because for me, what would that do to your Boogie Cousins exposure if it's him instead of Boogie?
It would lower it. I still wouldn't go crazy with him either. I just have a hard time thinking that they combine for 48 minutes because, for one, I don't know how many Boogie can play, and I have a hard time saying that, like, I think Mamukelashvili plays 30. But also, I just think that they get absolutely embarrassed by the Pelicans front court, and that for at least a stretch, you see them try and shoot them off the floor.
All right. And then let's go to, Grayson Allen, one other piece coming off of an absolute stone cold worst performance, 16 and a half fantasy points in 30 minutes there. Any interest in going back to him at 13% rostership on DK?
Yeah, Allen and Connaughton both seem interesting to me just because, you're going to get a lot of ownership going to Drew Holiday. You're going to get a lot of ownership going to Chris Middleton, and they deserve it for sure. Cousins as well. But you have Allen and Connaughton kind of falling through the cracks here, still in a really good matchup, still at decent price tags, more opportunities available for them. Neither one has benefited at all in terms of point per minute production without Giannis on the floor this year, but the minutes are more secure. You certainly can just get a hot shooting game from Grayson Allen. So nowhere near the priority that the other three guys are, but I still think Connaughton and Allen look fine.
So let's go over to the New Orleans side, and I'm going to start here because you had talked about Cousins and Mamu. We've got Jonas Valanciunas now, 8,200, which has been dropping down. He was up over 9K there. Brandon Ingram comes back, starts eating up some of the usage, and Jonas Valanciunas at 8,200 at 10% is probably one of my favorite center plays of the day, and it sounds like he is for you too. Give me the sales pitch on Jonas going up against Boogie and Mamu in this spot.
Mamukelashvili can't play defense. DeMarcus Cousins can't move. Jonas Valanciunas has like every advantage in the world here.
There we go.
The only concern, like literally the only thing that I'm concerned about with Valanciunas is what I was just saying about Milwaukee. What if they just 4 minutes into the game, call the timeout, and they're just like, all right, screw this, and we're just gonna put like Rodney Hood at center and make Joval, run around. And even if they do that, like New Orleans could just say, okay, whatever, we'll just have Joval score 100 points. But like you've seen it at times in the past where the game just ends up playing extremely small. I don't think that's a big enough concern that it's getting me away from Joval. I'm just kind of talking through like both sides of it, but absolutely phenomenal spot. I don't really know what the Bucks do to slow him down.
All right. Well, there's other guys here too. Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart getting quite a bit of attention here at his current number. One of the better rebounding small forwards, I suppose. 14.4% total rebounding percentage here over the course of the last year. It's kind of up in the likes of Steven Adams range, who was at 17.7% with the team. So we're talking about a guy who can definitely get double-double potential out there, should play a lot of minutes here. What are you looking at from the wings here from New Orleans?
Josh Hart looks pretty good, 5,500 with small forward and power forward eligibility on DraftKings, likely to give you around 34 minutes. He's about a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy. I like Ingram in tournaments. He was one of the top 5 guys in my DraftKings contrarian play video. I think it's kind of difficult to get to him. Like, for example, if you're just talking who would I rather have in a lineup, the answer would be like Jason Tatum for $300 more. There's plenty of other guys to get to, but Ingram's projected for 8% ownership. He is likely to give you 37 minutes or so if the game's competitive. He has a 30% usage rate this year. There's no Giannis, which just makes the defense a little bit worse. Ingram certainly has a really high ceiling here, so think he's a pretty interesting tournament play. And then in the backcourt, some pretty cheap pricing on Devontae Graham and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They're both volatile players, but 5,200 on Graham, 4,200 on Alexander-Walker. Certainly don't mind taking some shots at them in tournaments of low ownership.
Anything else from this game for you?
Not really, other than Hernan Gomez is going to smash Mamukelashvili for 15 minutes.
I was going to say, I was like, if I can get in on some showdown or something, there's no showdown. That would have been a lot of fun. Would have been a nice ingredient. In the context of this slate, pretty tough here, but we obviously had 2 massive pieces of news here. So let's start with Cole Anthony, because that game is going to be the only one that locks at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Want to make sure everybody has some information. And we're going to have the half-hour Yahoo show, I know, after it'll be Greg and Terry leading you guys up to lock. And then half an hour after, they'll be leading you up to the 7-game slate for Yahoo. So check that out. Don't go anywhere when we get done with this. And, 90 minutes of extra basketball content. That's beautiful stuff. But Cole Anthony got ruled out here. I'm still thinking we got to wait on what that starting lineup looks like. But, I mean, you're just going to be playing 3 Orlando Magic guys in this early game, of course, right?
There's so many other good spots to get to.
It's true.
And these guys suck. Like, they might score 65 points tonight.
I'll take the over, but I know what you're saying. I totally get that. I mean, it's just Michael Mulder is probably the guy, if I had to guess. I mean, he did start a game. It was end of November. He played 27 minutes, only put up 14. God, it is just so hard to look at this guard position and think of what they're going to do. I mean, Hassani Gravit is a person that exists in the world. And I guess he has a pulse and he's 3K.
So do you know anything about these guys? I don't even know, other than Schofield, I don't know what position these guys are.
No, because it sucks. Like RJ Hampton, I could tell you everything about. Now he's out, so it doesn't really matter there. Michael Mulder played with Golden State back in the day. He was kind of a fill-in for a number of those teams. He was if you remember, he was like the lowest price guy that you could buy for $1 on Top Shot when he was with Golden State. That's my memory of Michael Mulder.
No, I meant
been a guy to shoot.
I didn't mean him. I meant the 10-day contracts.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely no jack shit about any of them.
Okay, so
legitimately zero.
Hassani Gravett is 25, 6'2", so he's a guard. We know Schofield is a forward. Aleem Ford is not on Wikipedia, so that's always a good sign.
Been on Wikipedia.
6'8", 217, so front court. And then BJ Johnson, I believe, is a wing / forward as well.
Wow. Admiral Schofield played for Tennessee.
So
that's cool.
The only confirmed 5 players they have right now are Mulder, Wagner, Okiki, Carter Jr., Robin Lopez, and then you have Harris questionable. If the 10-day contracts are available, I mean, at least some of them have to be or they can't play. I'm assuming that Gravett has a decent role here. I don't really know what to do with that. I agree with you that Mulder probably plays, but here's the thing with Orlando, and it goes back to what I was saying about on a lot of slates, you would kind of just have to be jamming them into lineups, but I think that you can be a little bit more measured here. If you take Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs off the floor this year, Chuma Okiki, 199 minutes, 0.74 DraftKings points per minute. Franz Wagner, 134 minutes, 0.66. Michael Mulder, 103 minutes, 0.54. Wendell Carter, 1.26 in 66 minutes. Lopez in 61 minutes is at 0.96. 54 minutes for Gary Harris, 0.55. Like, all of these guys just absolutely suck. It's not like a lot of times you get a situation where the guys at the end of the bench are still able to just like fill the stat sheet. I don't even know that Orlando can really do that here.
Incredible.
Not to mention a lot of these guys, I'm assuming, aren't even in the player pool.
Well, a number of them looks like are. I mean, we got Admiral Schofield in there. I mean, it looks like a number of those guys that we can kind of be looking to. But to speak to your point, I mean, these guys are also just expensive compared to some other places you can get on this slate.
Yeah, like, the 10-day contract guys actually are, which surprised me. But
yeah,
it's kind of like the minutes are going to be there. But I think that when you look at this slate and just how many teams are shorthanded, you're getting huge minutes in a lot of other spots too.
Yeah. And we're going to have a bunch of news break. And if you want to lock in your roster spots here, I mean, that's kind of the way that I'm thinking through this. Like from a late swap perspective, you don't want to be locking in a bunch of crappy Orlando value when you're going to have a lot of potentially really good Sacramento value. We'll talk through that situation here as well. It's pretty hairy. Let's jump over to the Boston side. Again, I'm sorry to just be backpedaling. We're going to be able to fly through the Charlotte, Portland, and the Lakers, Minnesota game. I think one side might be more appealing, and it's not the Lakers side anymore, which is very strange to say. But Boston, no Dennis Schroeder. What are your main impressions from that?
Peyton Pritchard's in the rotation. So I'd assumed Schroeder was going to start in place of Horford. Now he's out. Langford maybe starts.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the right. I think that's the right call. I have Langford that I gave some more minutes to here. I mean, we had him at 25. I think you put him up around 28, 29. Is it enticing at 3,400? Probably not. You could probably do some more there. You could probably use that money elsewhere or just, have the roster spot elsewhere. I don't know. I think Tatum was always secure. He was always going to be the guy. Jaylen Brown, you talked about on FanDuel, projected around 37 minutes. I think that makes some sense, but I'm not doing a whole heck of a lot to change much else other than Josh Richardson at 3,200, I think becomes actually intriguing to me. And that's horrible.
I'll just say Josh Richardson becomes interesting. He hasn't played since December 8th, but he did play 30 minutes that day. So I don't know how much he plays, but I think it's reasonable to expect like at least 26, 28 minutes somewhere in there. And I think Marcus Smart looks a little bit better. It's not like he's ever going to be a really high usage guy, but taking Schroeder out and knowing that you're replacing him with like Langford or Naismith or Richardson, it doesn't really matter. There is just a little bit more usage to go around.
All right. There's a 0.0% chance we're going to do Hall of Fame, but thank you, Tyler. That's good to know here. We'll do the Yahoo read here after this. Let's get another game in the books here. Spurs at Utah here. We've got 11.5 point dogs here on the road in Utah, 226 total though here. mean, we've got some high upside options that exist. Donovan Mitchell is now down to 8,400, which really sticks out. He sticks out on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Rudy Gobert, in the context of centers, he's more expensive on 8,300, but he can put up 50 plus in any spot here, especially going up Jakob Poeltl and all these other guys on the other side. But talk to me about the Spurs side first. It just doesn't seem like we're seeing the same upside from DeJounte Murray, with Derek White playing really meaningful minutes back in the mix here. Derek White, 67, has had some upside, but anything from the Spurs appeal to you at all on this slate?
Not really on DraftKings. On FanDuel, DeJounte Murray at 9K is kind of interesting just because that's a pretty cheap price tag for him. But this matchup is bad. The Spurs are one of the healthiest teams on the slate. That kind of by itself is enough to typically disqualify a team unless they are drastically underpriced, and San Antonio is not.
All right. And Hero is now doubtful. I think we were kind of assuming that he was closer to being out, so nothing really to change or address there. Going to the Utah side, though, obviously Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, those are the two guys I kind of talked on the front end who have the kind of upside that you're looking for in this slate. What are you doing with them and other pieces from Utah that might intrigue you?
So Utah kind of, when I mentioned San Antonio, I said it kind of, disqualifies them because they are essentially healthy. Same for Utah. The difference is that Utah's prices were just basically slashed across the board. Donovan Mitchell is like $600 less expensive than last game, like $800 less for Gobert, something like that. Conley, Clarkson, these guys all got cheaper price tags. So I like getting to Utah quite a bit. San Antonio has been one of the faster teams in the league this year. They're in the top 10 in pace. So it's a nice spot in that regard for Utah. And these guys aren't getting a lot of ownership just because there are so many other good plays on the slate. I love getting the teams like that in tournaments where these guys aren't the best plays, but it's not because of anything to do with them. It just has to do with other players being in a little bit better spot and projecting a little bit better. It gives you an ownership discount when they still have massive ceilings. So, Mitchell and Gobert both look really good. They're getting the most ownership on DraftKings at 15 and 10%, but 5,400 for Conley, 4,500 for Jordan Clarkson, at both of those guys at 6% ownership. I like them in tournaments as well.
All right. Anything else from this game for you?
No, pretty much just all the Utah guys and very little of the San Antonio guys.
I think that makes some sense. Also making sense is heading over to Yahoo right now, our sponsor here of the Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock show. Why? Because they have the best contests around the entire industry with the lowest management fee or rake, whatever you want to call it. They have the best contest, not just for NBA here with the 12 Days of Christmas. The 12 Days of Winning is the correct name of that promotion, but NFL as well. They have crazy overlay. The 200K overlay contest that they run every single Sunday is just insane. And not only that, but right now, if you sign up over at Yahoo, you'll get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum completely free. Every single sport behind the paywall. It doesn't get any better than this. Plus, check this out. $100 first match deposit bonus with Yahoo as part of their 12 Days of Winning when you use promo code XMAS100. That's XMAS 100, one word, for a $100 first match deposit bonus. So you put in 100, you'll get another 100, and it doesn't get better than that. Plus, tonight we're running a 2K Awesemo free roll that you can enter. We'll have Tyler or somebody's spam that into the chat here. We've got the Awesemo free roll. It is so simple, so easy. You just play for free. Use that $100 deposit bonus. Get that free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. There's no better time than now to go check out Yahoo. Really fun to play on that site, and they push back lock half an hour, so we don't even have to deal with the Orlando garbage over on that slate. So really looking forward to playing Yahoo tonight, and you should too. All right, we got 3 games to get to here in 16 minutes, and we'll have that half hour there for Yahoo to talk on Live Before Lock. So looking forward to that with Greg and Terry coming up right after us. But we've got the Lakers at Minnesota here. We have Memphis and Sacramento is the first one here on the board. We should really get to that one. I know it's going to take a little bit more time, and we can allocate our time a little bit differently there. But -7 here for Memphis. They opened at -2 and moved all the way to -7 because, I don't know. Everybody on Sacramento is out, it would seem. Starting with the Memphis side here, though, it's the same situation. No John Morant, no Brandon Clark, no Zaire Williams. What are you seeing here from the Memphis side?
So I wanted to answer Douglas Bowman's super chat real quick. He said, Jaylen Brown, great tournament play now. I think he's still fine. DraftKings, I still think it's really tough to get there. 7,200 on FanDuel. He looks good. I don't think a whole lot changes for him, but it does, make it maybe he could play a little bit more, but I still don't feel too comfortable giving him a ton of minutes just because he's working his way back from injury. But I think he looked like a good tournament play on FanDuel regardless. As far as Memphis goes, one of the best spots on the slate going up against a shorthanded Sacramento team. We know they play fast. We know they don't defend even when they're healthy. Now they're probably going to be even worse. And you have some pretty solid pricing on Memphis as well, pretty much across the board. Jaren Jackson Jr., Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones. These guys are all $6,700 or less on DraftKings. We've seen Steven Adams playing a little bit more. Desmond Bane's usage goes up without Morant. So does Brooks. So does Jackson. Tyus Jones has averaged about 31 minutes per game in the games that Morant has been out at 0.91 DraftKings points per minute. I like getting to all of these Memphis guys. There is a non-zero chance this game gets scratched at some point during the night. If it does, though, it's not that big of a problem because you do have two other appealing games as well in the Portland-Charlotte game that has like a 227 total or something like that. The Lakers-Minnesota game has a 221 total. So there's plenty of stuff you can swap to.
I will say, though, yeah, it's going to get dicey here on the other side of this basketball game because here's who we know is going to be available for the Kings tonight. Hield, Barnes, Thompson, Ramsey, Harkless, Jones, Woodard II, and Queta, Queta. That would be really good in Scrabble if that were an actual word that you could spell. I'm going to throw that out there for anybody playing the name game Scrabble version. Have fun. But that's what we do know. We also have waiting in the wings, Halliburton and Metu, which are gigantic pieces because you would want, I feel like Tyrese Halliburton would be the guy that if I can get to on this slate and he's good to go, I want to get to an outrageous amount. How about you?
Yeah, so do I. Should play a ton of minutes as long as he's able to go. He's been 0.91 DraftKings points per minute this year. His rates don't really change. Clint Capella is available to play, so finally some good news. His rates haven't really changed much without De'Aaron Fox. He's at 0.96 DraftKings points per minute, but he should just play a ton of minutes here. So if he's able to go, he looks really good. If he's not able to go, you'll have other options you can swap to. We'll get more clarity on the Kings. This is another reason why I think, even though they're going to play a lot of minutes, that Orlando is still kind of just a little less appealing than they normally would be because you have basically the same team, even a more shorthanded team in Sacramento at the end of the night when we have less information to lock. They're naturally going to be lower owned.
Agreed. I think that Sacramento is the team you definitely want to be targeting over Orlando. We just got news that Gary Harris is going to play tonight. That's 30 minutes of nothingness that's going to be running around. So that's helpful, I think, just in the context of this slate where other Orlando pieces you might have been able to take some shots on. I bet he absorbs enough minutes that we don't have to be looking, all over the place to be finding other guys here from the Magic. So that's a plus.
So I agree with you there for sure. I'm glad that he's apparently playing because I just didn't want to have to deal with those G League guys more than I have to. But make sure he's in the starting lineup. If we got available to play, if he's not in the starting lineup, I don't think he plays.
I would agree with that as well. I mean, he's been playing 30 plus minutes here. Yeah. And again, this isn't a situation with Suggs where it was earlier in the season where, Gary Harris was still playing absent Suggs. With no Suggs out, if Gary Harris is not starting, you're right. He's just not going to see the floor. So there you go. Definitely a good addition to that. Metu as well, 3,700 here for him. I think that he just stands out as another guy in tournaments to be getting to. Tristan Thompson nearing 20% here. Can you rank some of these guys from Sacramento for DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever site you want to just talk about in the context of this? Who are your favorite plays in order from the Sacramento side?
Yeah, so still kind of working through this because of the Davion Mitchell news, but Buddy Hield at 5,100. He's got to play a lot of minutes. He has a 25% usage rate without De'Aaron Fox this year. He looks great. I like Halliburton, like we said. I would put him second. Harrison Barnes probably third. Thompson looks like a good value option, assuming he's starting. Damian Jones should be backing him up. He'll be low owned. He's 3K. He looks fine. So I think those guys are pretty much the priorities. Ramsey probably plays a decent amount of minutes with Davion Mitchell out, but I don't think you really need to get there on this slate.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, there you go. And we just got news. What do we win for getting Romeo Langford in the starting lineup confirmed? Like, what do we win? Do we win anything?
I'm just glad we got it right. Because I didn't want to have to give Josh Richardson more minutes mainly.
Yeah, I was adjusting my minutes as we go here too. But yeah, it was a fun guess here. I mean, I'm going to say that he's somebody that's in play, but again, not a priority by any means on this slate. Do you feel any differently than that?
No.
Cool. There we go. That's Sacramento and Memphis. Stick around for the Live Before Lock show. I can't tell you how imperative it is to be reacting to news. If that game cancels, I apologize. There's nothing we can do about it, but it's such a good spot to be getting to here on the Sacramento side. Nobody's going to be disagreeing with that. 10 minutes, 2 games to go here. Let's go to Lakers and Minnesota. Lakers just short of a 1-point dog here in Minnesota. I'd said before the show, what a weird thing that they're playing basketball at 9 p.m. in Minnesota. What a weird start time.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, also not making sense to me is how Russell Westbrook was in health and safety protocols, and now he's probable. He's now out of health and safety protocols. We just got news that, of course, Isaiah Thomas got signed after his 42-8-6 outburst in one G League appearance. I think he'll be active, it sounds like, for tonight. I don't see him in the player pool over on DK, so that isn't going to be any kind of a talking point for that slate for sure. But on the top end, it's a talking point that Russell Westbrook's going to be in there because Anthony Davis is 9,400. He's getting 17% rostership here at the moment. It's a really cheap number to be looking at for AD, as low as he's been all season long. How do you look at him in the context of this slate?
He looks really good. Like 94 is such a cheap price tag for Anthony. 9,400 is such a cheap price tag for Anthony Davis. Westbrook being in, I guess hurts a little bit, but I don't think it affects Davis nearly as much as it affects LeBron. Davis has been the best per minute guy out of the three when all three of them play. It's a decent spot for him. Yeah, he looks good. Like he's up there with Jason Tatum. He's a little bit more expensive. They both project really well here.
And I thought we were going to be able to talk about some ancillary options here from the Lakers with Russell Westbrook out, but that is not the case. He's in. Austin Reeves played a boatload of minutes. I don't think I'm going to be falling for that trap considering, he played 32 minutes. He was on fire, 5 for 6 from 3 there against Dallas. Maybe he gets a little extra run here in the absence of Malik Monk, but they have Wayne Ellington. They have Kent Bazemore, who's been playing, 15 useless minutes here in some of these spots. I don't really see anything else here other than Anthony Davis, some smattering of LeBron, and moving on with my day. Do you see anything differently?
No, that's pretty much where I'm at. Like if this slate were a little bit different, throwing some shots at any of Ellington, Melo, Reeves would make some sense, and just hoping that they get you 24 DraftKings points. But I'm not even sure 24 DraftKings points is really that useful in any lineup spot tonight, given all of the value that's available. And that would be, for most of those guys, it would be, a good game. So I don't really see a whole lot outside of Davis. And, if you get to some LeBron, that's fine.
All right. And then on the Minnesota side of this one, and we'll talk about that Orlando starting lineup before we get to the last game of the night here. But Minnesota, no Anthony Edwards and no Taurean Prince, both of them in health and safety protocols, the two guys from the Minnesota side that will be out for tonight. That vaults up D'Angelo Russell at 7,600. He was up around 9K there for a hot second, and, up 8,800 coming back, and he's still playing those mid-30s minutes here. 7,600 for him. He's getting a lot of attention. How do you kind of rank him up against the Kyle Lowrys and the Drew Holidays of the world tonight?
I think he's right up at the top. He's right up there with Drew Holiday for me. He going back to the start of last season, he has I'm on the wrong team. He has a 29.4%.
You are allowed to just be so screwed up today. It doesn't even matter. You're crushing.
He has a 29.4% usage rate, 37.1% assist percentage. You're likely to get 35, 36 minutes from him here. The Lakers play at a fast pace. This game should have plenty of possessions. It has a 221 total last I looked. So Russell looks great. The salary was falling. You get him at basically the same price point as Holiday. He projects similarly to Holiday. So absolutely love getting to D'Angelo Russell.
And Patrick Beverley, I will say people are getting really astute at NBA DFS, where his fantasy point per minute rate has definitely gone up with this Minnesota basketball team. He's been in the starting unit, which is definitely helpful in terms of getting some secure run. He's sub 5K, 4,700, a lot of boxes checked. Are you getting to Patrick Beverley, or do you see yourself getting to Patrick Beverley on this slate?
Yeah, I think he's just underpriced at 4,700. He's been a productive player this year. He's likely to give you around 32 minutes tonight. Could play even more. The only real, risk with him is that he gets in foul trouble / gets ejected because he's playing against Russell Westbrook. That's always, a greater than 0% chance, but still at 4,700, he just looks like a solid value option. Even Jared Vanderbilt at 5,300 in this game seems pretty appealing given his rebounding numbers.
I mean, I could even say and make a case. I don't want to. I'm not going to make a Malik Beasley case. That's just me being a Minnesota guy. Go ahead.
I don't think I get to him. I don't think I play much of him, but it also wouldn't be surprising if it just ends up being a game where Beasley plays well. The opportunities are going to be there. If he's playing well, the minutes are there. There's just also so many other plays on the slate. Yeah,
220.5 total. I mean, it's the lowest of the 3 games in the Midnight Hammer, but there's so many ways of trying to construct some of those lineups. Really interesting late night. late night hammer that we'll have. I'll probably be playing some late slate tonight. I think it's a really intriguing 3-gamer here, but anything else for you from this game? And then we will round it out.
Yeah, I think I forgot to mention Towns.
Him.
Since the start of last year, he's averaged 1.47 DraftKings points without Edwards per minute, without Edwards on the floor. This year, he's at 1.59. I think you see a pretty sizable bump for him. He'll probably get his fair share of Anthony Davis defensively, but a lot of opportunities available for Karl-Anthony Towns at reasonable ownership tonight.
All right. Orlando starting lineup. We've got Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, Chuma Okiki, Wendell Carter Jr., and Robin Lopez there in the 5. That is your 5 here. What are your initial reactions to that before we move on?
It makes me feel better about Lopez's minutes. He had started a game. I need to find it again. He played like 28 minutes in the last game that he started. And that was a game. Sorry, he played 31 minutes against Cleveland on November 27th. Mm-hmm. That was a game where the Magic had plenty of players. It wasn't like they were super shorthanded. You just had, I think it was Bamba out or Carter out, one of the two. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a good chance that you get, another 28 to 30 minutes from him here on this particular slate. That doesn't make him a lock because there's a ton of other guys, but it does make him look like a pretty good value.
Yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns, Jokic, massive ceilings on the top end, even Rudy Gobert that you want to plug in there. And then on the bottom end, we talked already about Boogie. We talked about some of the guys that you can take shots with from Sacramento as well. Definitely going to be some value to be had. Center, you probably want to get it right. You usually need to get it right on most slates, but let's round it out with Charlotte at Portland here. 229, highest total here on the board, 2.5-point dogs for Charlotte going into this spot. LaMelo Ball, probable here for tonight. I think that kind of takes the shine off of everything else. I have nothing from Charlotte. Do you?
Not really. They have some cheap guys, and it is a good matchup against Portland. Like, there should be a ton of scoring in this game. But Ball coming back, not only does it take some production, but it probably flattens out the minutes a little bit. Like, I still think you're getting 36, 37 minutes from Bridges. You're probably getting like 34 to 36 from Hayward. Rozier probably around like 33, 34. But it takes away those 38, 39-minute games that we were getting before. So outside of, just them ending up in a random lineup here or there, I don't see a whole lot from Charlotte.
All right, MJazz22. What's your max amount of Orlando players on FDGPP? 4?
Probably on this slate, probably 3.
Yeah, it's probably going to be 3. But I'm just saying they're like 4 because FanDuel, you can't play better than 4. I'm just being a dick. But
yeah, but
hey, welcome to the team. 9 months. Much appreciated, MJazz22. I'm just joking around a little bit.
Like what for? Like, in all seriousness, because like it is a good question. Like with them, they have 10 guys, but we don't know exactly how many minutes some of those guys will play. But like, what 4 guys would you possibly want in the same lineup?
I can't think of it.
Like,
I mean, it would be
Lopez, Okiki, Wagner, Carter, I guess, are the best 4. But if you need those 4 guys to win, then oh well.
Only shared statistic in basketball and assist. So there's that. I mean, and the only shared stat in basketball, an assist to a bucket. Yeah. Everything else is individualized. So yeah, it's not going to be so much of a priority for me to try to get. I mean, I bet I get a couple with 3 where I kind of rotate if it's going to be the cheap ones on DK, but FanDuel, probably not very likely here for me. But to the Portland side we go. Let's round this puppy out. Damian Lillard getting quite a bit of rostership on both sides, 9,300 and 8,700 respectively on DraftKings and FanDuel. I think that it makes a lot of sense for his ceiling. Nice to see that he's been playing high 30 minutes. I mean, he played 47 minutes right out of the gate there, his second game back, 37, 47, 38 minutes, tons of minute security there. Norman Powell can cannibalize from time to time some of that usage. But I mean, Damian Lillard, how do you look at him on this slate?
I think he looks really, really good. The price tag came down to 9,300. Now he gets this like cheat code matchup against the Charlotte team that plays really fast. LaMelo playing should make them play, even faster. They don't defend. Lillard's playing huge minutes. It's a really good spot for him. So I like Lillard quite a bit at 9,300. He played 38 minutes last game. I don't think there's any reason to think he's really playing anything, less than that outside of foul trouble or a blowout. So he looks really good, but Yusuf Nurkic has been playing more with this team shorthanded. It's likely you get 30 plus minutes from him in a fantastic spot. So he gives you another really, really good center option that you can look at. Norman Powell's likely to play 36 plus minutes. Simons, Nance, Little, Covington, all likely to play 28 to 30 as, sort of secondary pieces here. So I think the priorities from Portland are Lillard and Nurkic, but Powell, Simons, Nance, Little, to a lesser extent Covington, I think all of those guys look like pretty good plays.
Yeah, Little played 35 minutes. He got dinged up against Phoenix and had to leave that game for a second. And so I think people were kind of underestimating what those minutes could look like there. 10-point loss, 35 minutes for Nasir Little. I think 4,100, that was my big takeaway. I'll probably get to some of him there. But that'll do it, everybody. That is the deeper dive. Holy Mother of God. Adam, well done by you today, sorting through the madness. Any final words for the people as we get out of here?
Pay attention to news. Be ready to late swap. Be around your computers as best you can tonight because there's probably going to be late news.
Yeah, we could get a baseball like rain out of a Sacramento game, and that would just be really enjoyable. Thank you so much to Tyler Zander there behind the virtual glass. Much appreciated to him helping us through with it as well. Did a great job with the injury sheet. And Malaker, hey, when will Josh say hello to the people? I don't know. I say hello to the people. That's just how I roll. But we have the NBA Live Before Lock show coming up right now. 90 minutes of Greg and Terry. They'll be doing the 30 minutes for our sponsor, Yahoo. Thank you so much to them. He's Adam. He's very, very calm and collected. I'm Eric. I'm frenetic, but I made it. Here we are. We'll see you guys later.
It is the Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock show. And the only thing more broken in this NBA slate is Zoom itself and technology. All kinds of issues trying to get this going where I was seeing everybody on my computer. Tyler couldn't see me. Then I was just getting the loading screen. But whatever, who cares about that? Today's show is sponsored by Yahoo, and we have got so many injuries to talk about, Terry. And not even injuries, but just these COVID situations creating so much value on the slate. So I'm just going to ask you this right off the top. Looking at your lineups, which team do you have the most exposure to?
I don't even know if I can answer that. There's a ton of Orlando is coming through in these various crunches from site to site. And it's just, it's kind of focused around a couple specific players. Chuma Okiki, Wendell Carter, Robin Lopez is popping in on the DK crunch. A lot more Franz Wagner on the FanDuel crunch. So it's probably Orlando, but there's a concentration. Like there's some Kings players getting into the mix. I'm getting a ton of Jokic, which I'm happy about. I was high on him as an extreme pay up option. But team-wise, probably Orlando, just from that base of value from that insane roster they're going to be playing.
Yeah, so for me, it's pretty close. Two teams that I'm getting to the most, it is the Orlando Magic and the Milwaukee Bucks. There's no Bobby Portis, there's no Giannis Antetokounmpo, so Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, those are very, very pivotal plays for me. The slate's insane, and I think right off the bat, I think we should address too. There was some recent news that came in. Moses Moody is going to be starting at shooting guard for the Warriors today in place of Jordan Poole. Does nothing for me. There's so much value on the slate. I don't assume that Moody's going to come out and play a whole bunch of minutes. I still think that the minutes are going to be allocated, split amongst him, Gary Payton II, the Mitten, Damian Lee, Otto Porg play a couple extra minutes. So that in mind, there isn't really anything on the cheap end that I like from the Golden State Warriors. Now, one other thing I want to ask you, just kind of general overarching strategy view on this slate before we start to get into some more of the position by position. The Kings situation. We've got Marvin Bagley III, De'Aaron Fox, Alex Len, Lewis King, Terrence Davis, Davion Mitchell now, Rashawn Holmes, all out. Tyrese Halliburton's questionable. Chimezie Metu is questionable. How are you going to approach this game with so many guys who could potentially be really strong value plays, but it doesn't start until 10 o'clock?
Yeah, I tell you what, I like guys on the Memphis side of this one too. They've come down a little bit in terms of where they look on the board, particularly at the guard spots. Jaren Jackson still looks pretty good on the other side of this one, but some of the guards came down a little, but I'm still kind of interested because not a ton of the field is going to be on guys like Tyus Jones. I just don't know that we get this game at the end of the day. Like it's just seems like it might be trending toward that. If they drop Halliburton, who the hell knows? But yeah, I want to have some spots in this game. And fortunately, everybody's at relatively low to mid-range pricing. So it's not that difficult to swap guys around. It's not like we've got to save, 10, 11,000 for anybody in this game. So I'm not really that worried about it. I definitely want to reserve some room to have the plays from whoever does end up taking the court, assuming this game tips. It's just difficult to predict exactly where that's going to go. But we've got highly optimal guys on the Kings. We've got interesting plays on the Memphis side of things. So I definitely want to have a plan for it, and I definitely want to have some room to edge these guys in or out of lineups.
Yeah, so addressing the cancellation concerns, it does seem like it was something reported as a possibility early in the day. But even if Metu and Halliburton get ruled out, I still count 8 active Kings for them today. They would have Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, Thompson, Jones, Ramsey, Harkless, Woodard, and Queta, who I'm not positive I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but such is the way of the NBA this week. We get introduced to new players that are DFS relevant every couple of days. So even if there is no Halliburton or Metu, I still expect they're going to have enough guys to play. So I'm not massively concerned about that. If the Orlando Magic are going to play, then I just assume everybody's going to play. Orlando is so banged up. Orlando had to sign 4 guys to 10-day contracts this morning to be able to play this game. The Chicago Bulls apparently get preferential treatment, but everybody else is looking like they have to be forced to play. So there's going to be more news, I'm sure, that's going to come in as we're going along. Guys, do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and this is just good signs. If you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel, your value play is more likely to have a big night tonight, and there's going to be a lot of value plays that stand out. But the only way you can ensure it is by liking the video, subscribing to the YouTube channel. Let's start by talking about some of the guards, Terry, and at the pay up options to start. I'm not getting all the way up to the top that frequently today. On FanDuel, Steph Curry looks pretty favorable. I'm not getting to him as much on DraftKings. But what are you prioritizing at the guard spot, paying up or saving salary?
Yeah, it's mostly savings. Some of the mid range, like the 5s, the 7s, on the DraftKings slate, are coming kind of to the top here with guys like Kyle Lowry, guys like Halliburton, assuming that he goes. Buddy Hield is popping to the top of the list. D'Angelo Russell. There's a lot in that like mid range kind of space. That said, I do, since we're going to have so much salary to spend, I do just have an inclination to grab 2 stars in a lot of these lineups and just go to spots like Curry, spots like Trae Young. I think is somewhat interesting at 10-2 on the DK slate. He's coming up as the 7th, 8th most optimal guard on the DK slate. He's coming up a little bit less interesting than that on the FanDuel slate in terms of where he ranks, but the percentage is a little bit higher. So it's a situation where we've got a lot of guys that after the very top end, where there's 4 or 5 guys that rank in the 20s in our optimal lineup percentage, there's a lot that just dropped kind of to the same plateau between, let's call it 15 and like 8%, where I know that's a bit of a range, but there's a lot of different guys in there that you can mix and match, somewhat low ownership, somewhat interesting plays, and a lot of upside guys in there. So it's a really strange structure to the position. And then when you go across sites, it's completely different on FanDuel, where, like you said, a guy like Steph Curry at 99 is very, very interesting to me over there. I want to get a lot of Steph on the FanDuel slate.
Yeah, on DK, where it's different is he's a lot more expensive for starters. But then also there's a lot of value at the guard position, and I just don't find him to be particularly appealing on a points per dollar basis. Steph Curry's priced up to 11.3 on DK. So, it's just a massive price. Like you're talking about, 15% more expensive. So that's where Steph Curry more favorable to me on FanDuel than he is on DK. How are you viewing a guy like guys like Kyle Lowry and Drew Holiday on this slate, who aren't quite all the way up in terms of pay up options, but considering the injuries these teams are dealing with, the Heat having no Bam Adebayo, no Jimmy Butler, I know that's been the case for a little bit, but also no Tyler Hero. And then with the Bucks, we've got no Giannis, no Bobby Portis. So how are you looking at guys in the upper mid-range like Lowry and Holiday?
Yeah, crunch-wise, I'm getting to a massive amount of Kyle Lowry, and I think it makes sense on the FanDuel slate. 7,000 over there, still a good price for him. So he's coming up quite a bit for me. A little bit less in the DK crunch. He's coming up at 7,800. He's just a little bit less optimal, a little bit less necessary. But I think the price is right on the FanDuel slate. 0.93 fantasy points per minute, up at 0.98 over the last 3 games. 35.3 minutes per game over the last 3. There's just a ton to do for him in that rotation right now, without the other stars on that team. So happy to get to Lowry shares. And I think Drew is very interesting on both sites. 8,200 on the FanDuel slate, multi-position eligibility. He's only coming up like 30% of the time in this crunch where I'm just running it off the top with no randomness or changes forced, just to see kind of what the quote unquote optimal lineups look like. So he wasn't coming through. He was coming through at 30%. That's a lot. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't coming through at like the massive 90+% that I was seeing Lowry in this one. So I'm very interested in, and that's a situation where I would probably manipulate it to push a little bit more Drew Holiday, just given the situation. He's coming up more than 20% optimal on the FanDuel slate. He's coming up 16% optimal on DK, but it's for 7,900 at the point guard spot. I think he's very interesting over there, but he's getting attention. He's negatively leveraged. So I like Drew Holiday. I think there's plenty for him to do, and I want to get to him probably a little bit more than the field, but I'd be curious to see where it comes down when we get final news and things approaching lock, just because of how it's coming up in this crunch.
Yeah, and something else that I'll point out, at least as it pertains to DraftKings, there's a lot of chalk on FanDuel. DK, there's so much points per dollar value that it's kind of spread out. So Buddy Hield is projected for 41% ownership. There's not a single other player on DK currently projected for more than 28% ownership. So I don't really look at anybody as being massively too popular or anything on DK. It's not like yesterday's slate. I was building lineups almost solely based off ownership and guys that I viewed as good pivot plays. Today, it's just going to be a lot of the guys I project the highest. FanDuel is going to be a different story because FanDuel Okiki is 45% projected ownership. Got Lowry at 41%, Wagner 40%, Hield 40%, Wendell Carter at 35%. So you just talked about how much Kyle Lowry is popping up for you, but even the 41%, you think that's a number to be overweight to on FanDuel?
I think you can, just based on the frequency with which he's coming up optimal. It might be somewhere where you want to shave a little bit of ownership off, undercut the field by a little. If he's in a quarter of my lineups, I'm happy with that. It's fine. But I think there's room to squeeze up over the field just based on how the FanDuel slate's coming together today in terms of being able to plug him in. He's a point guard only on the site, but there are a lot of mid-range shooting guard, small forward options. There's either you go up to the top at center or you're going down to some of the value plays at center in a lot of spots. Although now there's a little bit more mid-range on FanDuel, but I just think it's a spot where you can spend that like 7,000-ish kind of a salary and be okay and get beyond the field just based on how frequently is optimal. In terms of all the guards on FanDuel, he's coming up 35% optimal, and everybody who's on my board, the next highest guy is 24%. So that's a pretty big difference in the amount with which we find him optimal. And he's coming up similar story in the boom score probability, about 10 percentage points higher than most of the other guard options. So I do like the Lowry play on the FanDuel slate.
Yeah. And of course, as happens from time to time, you try to crunch a lot of lineups and look at some data on the screen. And the computer's just like, hey, this is too much value for us. We're just going to crash right now. So now looking at nothing on my screen, which whatever, apparently just par for the course with me and my technology situation right now. But that aside, I'll just, as I'm reloading this, I want to ask you about some of the value plays at the guard position, and who are some of the cheap guys that are standing out to you the most? It could be point guard or shooting guard.
Yeah, I was just going to drop an update in there, but since you had crashed out, I'll jump back over to the board here. So let's see. Let's go by DK pricing. 4,700 is probably the top end of what we'd consider maybe value plays today. Dunk Robinson, a little bit interesting in that Heat rotation, 35-minute projection on him. He's been a 0.71 fantasy point per minute performer for the season, but 0.89 in 32 minutes per game over the last three. So I think he's at least on the board, but like I said, it's the upper end of those value plays. I think Grayson Allen is pretty interesting at 4,300, despite what I have against him personally. I think Josh Richardson is very interesting at 3,200 at the shooting guard spot, now that we know that there's no Dennis Schroeder in addition to all the other absences in that Boston rotation. So I think he's definitely a play there. Marcus Smart was a guy, he's kind of a little bit higher. I would consider him like lower mid-range rather than an extreme value play at 5,400 on DK, 5,700 on FanDuel. But I think he's also just another guy who, just by virtue of there being some more to do, he's not a heavy usage guy, 16% usage for the season, but he still turns in 0.85 fantasy points per minute on that in 34.2 minutes per game. We've got him projected around 32.9. I think there's more for him to do, so he gains a little bit of value, becomes a little bit interesting. We can scroll down some of these other Miami guards. You could talk Gabe Vincent. You could talk Max Strus if you wanted to work him in. I wrote up Tyus Jones earlier in the day. He's kind of in that mid-range as well, in the 5,000s, but I don't think he's quite as interesting anymore. You could go down to like a Michael Mulder, who's got point guard, shooting guard eligibility for the dead minimum on the DK slate. We're stretching our definition of value now. Like if we go to the Mulder play for the dead minimum, he's still only coming up about 5-ish% optimal. So it depends how deep we want to go, how big of a dart throw do we want to talk about on a tournament slate. But I think these guys are definitely at least mix and match kind of pieces.
Yeah, and so here was somebody that I did want to ask you about, but I kind of lost my train of thought there when everything crashed and I was looking at nothing in front of my computer. We've got the Timberwolves situation. Anthony Edwards ruled out. He's in the COVID protocol early in the day. So with that in mind, there is a lot of usage that opens up for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm getting to a whole bunch of D'Angelo Russell. I'm actually getting to more D'Angelo Russell than I'm getting to Kyle Lowry or than I'm getting to Drew Holiday. And as much as I like those guys, I kind of think it's a similar situation for D'Angelo Russell. I also like the matchup against the struggling Los Angeles Lakers, and also a game that has a fairly high total. The only games with a higher total than the Lakers-Minnesota game, Portland-Charlotte, which is a game I don't have that much interest in, and the Denver-Atlanta game, which is another one that outside of Jokic, I don't have that much interest in. So I'm looking at the pace of play here. Minnesota is at home. They're favored. There's no Anthony Edwards. I love getting to D'Angelo Russell here. Do you feel any differently?
No, and our tools agree with that across both sites. I think it's a good call and definitely interesting player. Probably a little bit more so for 76 on the DK slate. Comes up around 20% optimal. On the FanDuel slate, he's a little bit less optimal for 8,000, but it's a negligible difference. He's got a decent boom score probability on both sites. He's been a 1.08 fantasy point per minute player across the course of the season, 26.2% usage under normal circumstances. And like you said, there's just going to be a void of usage without Edwards out there. So I would expect that to tick up. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities. We know he's not shy about taking those opportunities. He's also a player with a 30.5% assist share on the season, only a 51.3% true shooting percentage. So, I mean, a couple shots go down and we could have a nice ceiling game for D'Angelo Russell here. So I really like it. I like it for the price on both sides.
Yeah, and it's another thing too where it's just the ownership is not that problematic today. There are so many good points per dollar plays that to me it's it's kind of like, oh, okay. Earlier in the day, when you first see that there's going to be no Anthony Edwards, you assume, oh, D'Lo is going to be chalk. Karl Anthony Towns is going to be chalk. But the problem that you run into over the course of the day is then you start to say, well, there's 50 guys that should be chalk today. And that's just not the case. The ownership just kind of gets distributed evenly. Anybody that we haven't talked about the guard position that's making it into a lot of your lineups?
Not a lot. It's probably outside of the guys that we've brought up. It's probably just like mix and match guys. Let me jump over to the FC screen and see if there's anybody that we didn't really talk through. I mentioned most of these guys. I like DeJounte Murray a lot. He's coming up a little bit for me on the FanDuel slate, but only around 10% across 300 lineups that I just ran off here. So not a key play for me. Looks like Dame Lillard was coming up quite a bit in that pacey, frenetic Portland-Charlotte game later on. So that's is that in Charlotte or is that in Portland? I lost track.
It's in Portland.
That's in Portland. All right, so that is one of the nightcap games. So that's a space that I could definitely take some shares out, and you've got some pieces to move around with late swap with a high price guy. So if you're putting a few different pieces in, maybe you build in Dame as a high price guy with some of those Kings and Memphis guys that we were talking about, so that you've got room to swap around a lot of pieces in one of those lineups. I think that makes some sense. I mentioned Smart. I threw him into the mix. A lot of just mix and match beyond that.
Yep, I think that all makes sense. And we have a super chat here from Zachary Arakalian. I'm almost positive I butchered your last name, so sorry, Zachary, but his super chat. Do we like Gabe Vincent tonight for a good value? I do like Gabe Vincent. I have him projected for a little over 30 fantasy points. And just consider his matchup here against the Orlando Magic today. The Orlando Magic had to sign guys basically off the street to fill out the roster for tonight. And when I was talking about before, some teams got the benefit of, hey, we're going to delay your game, get your guys good and healthy. The Orlando Magic like, nah, screw you guys. You guys are playing basketball tonight. So they had to sign these guys today. The Orlando Magic had to sign these guys today to make this game happen. They had to sign Hassani Gravett, Admiral Schofield, I've heard of him, BJ Johnson, creative player, Aleem Ford, probably an NFL player or something. So the guys who they already had active earlier in the day, it was Wendell Carter Jr., Franz Wagner, Chuma Okiki, Robin Lopez, Gary Harris. Those are the regular rotation guys this team has. It's a mess. I have to look at that on paper and think this is a way easier matchup than we could ever possibly quantify for some of these Miami Heat guys. So Kyle Lowry is definitely the best overall guard play, but I do think Gabe Vincent's being a little bit overlooked.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a good spot for Vincent. Everything that you just said makes a ton of sense. They're playing people who just happen to be in Orlando today on the Orlando team. So yeah, I think that's a wise train of thought. Over the last three for Gabe Vincent, 33 minutes a game, 0.86 fantasy points per minute, up from 0.77 under normal circumstances. Plenty for him to do. Weak competition against them. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. And he's one of those guys that, you can cut down some ownership there without sacrificing a ton of our optimal rate. By comparison to some of the guys that are above him on the board in optimal rate, we're only losing, 4 or 5 percentage points when we jump down to him. And you're jumping from guys that are owned approaching 20-ish% down to 12%. So you're gaining a lot of ground in terms of the ownership. It's not something, like you've said a few times, it's not something we have to really, really sweat because it is so flat today. But if you do want to make a decision that's going to be with one of these value guys to get away from some of the heavier owned guys, he makes a ton of sense. So yeah, I like that one a lot.
And then one question is talking about some of these guards here. Do you have any reservations about going super heavy on the Magic or the Heat just from the standpoint of it's the first game of the slate and who knows what the hell is going to happen later in the night and maybe we want to have some flexibility available to us?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be sure that I was building lineups at least a little bit that way. Like look through it on Fantasy Cruncher, and that's where it's handy that Fantasy Cruncher is sorted by color, honestly, because you can just kind of do a quick scan. So I'd start looking for teams that are for lineups that are overweight to this game in general, where you're getting 3 or 4 pieces from Orlando, 3 or 4 pieces from Miami, and maybe you don't include those, or maybe you make some swaps in those and set it up a little bit differently. That said, I also just I don't love the pieces from Orlando. I know we've got a lot of DFS value here. They're just kind of clunky overall pieces. So it could just be a situation where these guys just come out and they're relatively flat. They deliver around the median projection, which for some of them comes close to getting us there. But with a lot of the other value and a lot of the interesting pieces on the slate, it might not be enough. So I think I want to be lighter to this game a little bit than my crunch might suggest. Like, I don't think I want to have nearly 100% Franz Wagner on FanDuel.
Yeah, I would agree that 100% Franz Wagner could be a little bit aggressive. By the way, just because people are asking about Moses Moody and fading or whatever, he's projected for less than 1% ownership. We're not talking about anybody who's going to be remotely popular today. There's just so much value plays to get to. And I hate to crap on Moses Moody, but he's just knocking. And by the way, he could go out and score 22, 25 fantasy points. Nice for a salary on DraftKings. I don't even think it's going to matter. I think there's going to be guys who are min price that score like 30 plus today. So anything else at the guard position that we haven't touched on that you'd like us to bring up here?
No, I think we got them all. Oh, well, Chris Middleton's got shooting guard eligibility on the FanDuel slate and has not been ruled out that I've seen. So I think he would be interesting as well, kind of by the same token of what we said about Drew Holiday and just a ton to do in a depleted rotation and a very good player. So 7,700 too is a pretty aggressively low price tag overall for Middleton and what we know his talents are.
I don't understand his ownership on DraftKings, and we could just talk about Middleton now in the Bucks situation. He's 6,700 on DK. I have him projected for a massive amount of fantasy points, and to me that just makes sense. I'm pulling up his numbers with Giannis and Bobby Portis off the court this year. He is going to play a very big role for this team. I have very little doubt about it. Chris Middleton this year. When you take Portis and Giannis off the court, Chris Middleton has a 36.6% usage rate, and he scores 46.41 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. He's woefully mispriced at 6,700, and he's not crazy popular. I don't get it. I feel like I'm almost missing something here. And you look at his price tag on DK, 6,700, 25% ownership. He should be over 50% owned, in my opinion, at 6,700. I don't get it. He's my favorite play on the slate. Could you talk me off him at all?
No, I mean, I honestly hadn't even noticed that it was a 6,700 because I was looking on the FanDuel side of my page here, and I was saying that I thought 7,700 was a pretty good price. So I am super enthusiastic about him at 6,700, small forward only. Of course, you drop the shooting guard eligibility. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I know it's a much lower price and a different tier, but would you rather figure out a way to spend 6,700 for Chris Middleton a bunch of times or go to Buddy Hield at 5,100 just in a total vacuum of everything else with similar minutes projections? Like, I want to go to Chris Middleton here every single time. They're not comparable players. I know that the DFS situation, the salary makes it comparable, but Buddy Hield is owned at 41%. Chris Middleton at 24.9% on the DK slate as of my last update. That's a situation that should probably be reversed. I mean, I definitely want all the shares of Chris Middleton at that price.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got people in chat saying Chris Middleton never does anything when he's chalk. I mean, the last time that Giannis was out, Chris Middleton scored 42.5 DraftKings points. Is that just some crazy massive ceiling game? No, but if he scores that at 6,700, you kind of need him, right? Yeah. I mean, that's a very strong game at 6,700. I'm playing a ton of Middleton in tournaments. You should be playing him in cash games as well. And the idea that he doesn't ever do well as chalk, I don't really agree with that, because literally he did well the last time that Giannis was out. So I think, I mean, that's also just like that's a meaningless thing to say, right? That's, he always does poorly on Sundays. Like, that would be more accurate because he at least knows it's Sunday. Chris Middleton has no idea how owned he is in DFS. It doesn't matter. It has no impact on what he's going to do on the court today. That's just nonsense. Yeah, and people asking when that was. It was December 4th, so not even 2 weeks ago. That's how out of sight, out of mind, and how little we think back for. This almost reminds me of yesterday, where people were saying that David Duke Jr. is a better basketball player than Evan Fournier because Duke was like David Duke. He shoots 30% from the field and 10% from three. And everybody's like, I gotta play this guy. Let's just play Chris Middleton today. It's gonna be okay. So we could open up and talk about some of the other forwards now. And there's a pay-up option I really like at forward today, and that is Jason Tatum. I understand the matchup against the Warriors is not the best one in the world on paper, but we do have the Warriors at least a little bit shorthanded due to COVID. Jason Tatum, 9,600 on FanDuel, 9,000 on DK. I think he's somebody who should be about $1,000 or so more expensive, especially when you consider the Celtics' current situation. There is no Dennis Schroeder. There is no Al Horford. Grant Williams doesn't matter as much, but those two guys individually being out, that's going to mean extra playing time, extra usage for Jason Tatum. I love getting to him today. How about you?
Yeah, it's a great spot. And we've talked about a few pieces of Boston already. And there's just to what you're saying, there's going to be opportunity. Tatum's their best player already. So he's a guy I always am happy to get to. I think he's fairly priced on the FanDuel slate at 96. And I think the 9,000 on DK is very, very appealing. I think that's a spot we can go to again and again. Eligibility at both forward spots coming up almost 20% optimal. He's a little bit owned, but like we've said about a few of these guys, especially at the upper tiers where you're just talking about some raw point potential, I think we don't have to sweat the ownership. It's around 25%. Don't really need to sweat that at all. So I like Tatum a lot on both sides here. And I agree with you. I'm not going to sweat the matchup quite as much just because it's a spot where there's so much opportunity for, the upper echelon players on this team to just produce where they need to because there's nobody else.
Yeah. And once again, even Jaylen Brown, even though he's back, what is Boston really getting out of Jaylen Brown right now? He's been pretty banged up this year. They've been really cautious with his minutes. So I'm not even sure that's the thing where you could expect Jaylen Brown to go out and play 34, 36 minutes. So of all the shorthanded teams, I think Tatum's somebody who's maybe getting a little bit overlooked right now as well. As for other forwards, let's talk about Chuma Okiki. Overall, my favorite value play on the slate. We've talked about the Orlando Magic situation, all the guys that are out for them. He's cheap. He's a fairly decent points per minute fantasy producer. And as long as he avoids foul trouble, he's probably just going to have to play a ton of minutes, unless we think some of these 10-day contract guys are playing ahead of him, which I tend to think is not going to be the case. But we've seen Okiki this year play 21 minutes per game, average 15 and a half DraftKings points. He could be looking at 40 minutes today at his price point. It's pretty hard for me to avoid him.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, he's one of the guys that's coming up a ton on both sites when I'm running crunches. No matter what I'm doing with the crunches, he's in a lot of them. 3,900 at the power forward on FanDuel, 36 both forward positions on DK. Gotta love the 58.4% boom score probability on the DK slate against just 28.7% ownership. On FanDuel, it's a little bit more efficient ownership. The public's at like 45%. His boom score is above that at 57.3. He's coming up 35% optimal. He's a player that puts up a 0.73 fantasy point per minute rate on just 16.6% usage, only 43.6% true shooting too. So, I mean, it's just been atrocious shooting for him. He is a guy who can produce, and particularly with the amount of minutes that we're expecting him to play, I think it's just a pace over time kind of a thing, a rate over time kind of a thing, rather, where we're just going to be able to book at least his median projection, which is probably enough at these prices, and a little bit of room for more. So I think there's plenty of reason to go to Okiki again and again here.
All right, a couple super chats to get to, but first, we want to shout out our sponsor, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, who we've got some contests over at Yahoo. They've got something that's called the 12 Days of Winning. And if you want to go and sign up at Yahoo, use the promo code XMIS100. That's all one word, and then XMAS. So one word, all capital letters, XMIS100. And you go sign up using that promo code. You get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. Also, we still have our deal. You go sign up over at Yahoo and you get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And here's what's really great about that deal. You really give Terry extra work. You want to put Terry to work, you go sign up at Yahoo, and he's got to set up all these membership deals, doing all the behind the scenes work, getting everybody hooked up with their memberships. So if you really want to take advantage of this deal and make Terry's life a little bit more difficult, which you should want to do, go sign up at Yahoo right now and get that free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, Terry, let's hit these super chat. Yeah, and Terry does love it, but right there, I think let's put the man to work. Let's make him busy. Frankly, 7 days of work a week for Terry is not nearly enough. Let's have him working 8 days. Super
pile those things up. I'll figure it out. Figure out a way to cram some more hours into my day. No problem.
All right. Well, Chris Middleton will not play today.
That's a twist.
All right. Terry. Okay. But by the way, sorry about the super chats. I know I said I was about to answer them, but then we just get this news that Chris Middleton's out, and somebody who I literally have in 95% of my lineups is no longer going to be in play. This massively alters the slate. So Terry, instant reaction to Chris Middleton not playing now today.
Withdraw lineups. Just go to see a movie or something instead. Go be with your family. It's Drew Holiday again is just going to be even more to do out on the court. And then I assume it's going to kick more value over to like Grayson Allen, who I was already getting a ton of. Pat Connaughton probably becomes a little bit more interesting now. You could see Rodney Hood, Jordan Nwora, a couple of the guys that we talked about the other day that could definitely see more minutes, more value here now. Taking a major piece and the guy that was probably going to be the best player out on the court for them. Do you think it impacts Boogie's minutes at all? We had him projected at like almost 22 minutes just by virtue of taking another good player off the court. Do you think that's something that gives him more minutes? I know it's, cross position talk, but
it's not going to. So I do not believe that it's going to impact Chris Middleton. I don't think Chris Middleton being out is going to mean more minutes for Boogie just because of the positionality of it.
Yeah.
Now, does it mean there's potentially extra usage for DeMarcus Cousins when he's on the court? Absolutely. I think that is certainly something that's within the realm of possibility. But now let's just look at this year. We take Giannis Antetokounmpo, we take Chris Middleton off the court. What do the usage rates look like for the Milwaukee Bucks this year? Surprise. Drew Holiday, 33.3% usage rate, scores 51.58 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. Over on FanDuel, that equals to 49 FanDuel points per 36 minutes. When DeMarcus Cousins is on the court, he's going to take a whole bunch of shots. So I like getting to him either way. I don't think this means more minutes, but maybe an extra shot or two over the course of the game. Anything from a value standpoint here that really stands out to you now from Milwaukee?
Just kind of some of the guys I flew through there. Like I said, I was getting a lot of Grayson Allen already at 4,000 on FanDuel. I expect that he would become a more valuable piece there. I don't love the 5,800 price tag on Connaughton on FanDuel, 5,200 on DK. I do like the multi-position eligibility that he gives you. So he gives you a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of creative lineup building, construction room. Similar story with Rodney Hood. If you wanted to go there, if you expect, we had him at 20.5 minutes already though, and he was essentially valueless. Outside of the fact that he was just a $3,000 guy, we had him projected at 12. So if we give him an extra 6-8 minutes, it's 0.54 fantasy points per minute for the season, 0.68 over the last 3. I don't know that he returns all that much more value there, but he's probably going to be on the court a little bit more. Jordan Nwora is a similar story. We had him projected under 10 minutes, was essentially valueless. If he gets up into the 16-18 range, maybe he sees jump to 2, 3, 5% relevant, but not really tremendous rates. But there are now a bunch of price plays for sure on the board here. So it's definitely a spot you can look, a different spot you can look for some value plays.
Yeah, this is quite the ongoings we have here. I assume that Jordan Nwora starts. He's somebody that I'm going to have some interest in now. I think that is something that's fairly likely to happen. We'll see when the starting lineup comes out. Also, Lonnie Walker is available to play. Not massive news, but whatever. He was questionable in the injury report. Want to make sure that we hit on that in case anybody was curious. Now, let me circle back and hit on some of these super chats now. Super chats. Let's see. Scrolling back, because then we had, especially as I'm just assertively saying that everybody should be rostering Chris Middleton, he gets ruled out, which leads to all the troll tweets in there, which I fully appreciate and love. But here we go. Found the super chats from Jake Lindland. Is Gary Harrison play tonight? Not for me. If this was a smaller slate where we had lesser value plays, then I think you make more sense. They're just better guys to get to. So the opportunity cost of playing Gary Harris is you just can't get to some of these other guys that I view as better options. Is Gary Harrison your player pool?
He might be in there in a couple of lineups where he popped up in the crunch. And if I got him in, a handful, I'd be fine with it, but it's not a play I'm going out of my way for. 31-minute projection, 4,400 on FanDuel, 39 on DK is maybe a little bit more appealing, but we're talking about single-digit optimal lineup rates, just barely over 10 in terms of the boom score on DK, under it on FanDuel. Not a guy that was really overly appealing to me. 0.55 fantasy points per minute up for the season, 0.47 over the last 3.
All right, next super chat here from I'm Real Forever. Is Joe Val a lock due to the Bucks' big situation? Absolutely not. Jonas Valanciunas is somebody who I actually don't even like all that much today. And then with guys like Giannis out, Brook Lopez has been up. It's not like Bobby Portis is a good defensive player by any means. If you got to Jonas Valanciunas, I wouldn't say it's problematic, but he's a very small piece in my player pool. Is he somebody you're playing a whole bunch of?
I don't mind it. I would certainly, if at under 10% ownership on DK, just over 10% ownership on FanDuel, it's definitely at least interesting to include him in a few lineups and just get away from some of the public shares. But again, we're talking about a slate where that's only for most of the slate. That's only like half the ownership of what some of these guys are going off at. So it's not like you're making a pivot where it's somebody owned at 45% and you're going down to somebody who's owned at like 5-10%. It's certainly a lot tighter than that. But I do think just in a situational conversation, it is certainly a good opportunity for Joe Val, given the absence of all these guys and given just the matchup here. 8,200 is a fair price on DK. 7,800 is certainly fair for him on FanDuel. So I would take maybe a little bit more than the public is getting to, but it's again not one that I'm really, really aggressively looking for.
And then to answer the other part of this question, lock, you would agree that's probably a little strong to call him a lock?
Joe Val? Yeah, that's definitely a little strong to call him a lock for sure.
Okay, so at least on that part, we're on the same page with, but yeah, not someone I'm getting to a whole bunch of. Other super chats here. I'm pretty sure that there was, and I'm pretty sure we had a couple more. Oh, here we go. Douglas Bowman, Steven Adams and Reddish or Langfield and Hield for a DK GPP. Also, Lillard is breaking the slate top scorer of the night. Bold call. I disagree. I appreciate the boldness though. But for Douglas Bowman's question, Reddish and Adams or Langford and Hield. I don't like either of those combinations. I like Hield the most of all those players, but those are not lineups I would be playing.
Yeah. Hield was the only relevant player on the board out of those four for me as well. So that's I would throw that one back into the fire and build a new one.
All right. As for other super chats, we are all caught up. So, all right, let's talk about other forwards now. And I just want to open it up to you. I don't even remember who we were talking about last time. I think it was Chuma Okiki off the top of my head. Then everything, I did an ad read. We got some super chats. Middleton went out. Everything went to shit. What forwards that you don't remember us talking about do you think are important pieces of the slate that we should be mentioning here?
I think assuming that he doesn't figure out a way to get out of this game, Anthony Davis at 9,400 on DK, power forward and center eligible from that upper tier is definitely interesting. If you're not going to Jason Tatum, maybe you go to shares of Anthony Davis for a little bit more. Coming up similarly optimal, a little bit less ownership than Tatum. Tatum pushing like 25% ownership, AD about 10 percentage points behind that. So I think from the pay up tier, he's super interesting over there. Again, assuming that he does play. Franz Wagner, like I said, I was getting a ton of him on the FanDuel slate. He's coming up fairly interesting and relevant on the DK slate as well, because he's under owned to where we've got him projected for the optimal rate. He's only pushing like 11% ownership, and he's coming up nearly 20% optimal. So that's one of your better leverage spots on the DK slate. It's not comfortable because he costs 6,200, but he gets at least eligible at small forward and power forward. We know there's going to be plenty to do, plenty of minutes to play in that Orlando rotation. So I think he's interesting over there. I think the leverage is the reason why. It's not a overly comfortable or play that I'm super happy about making. Going back to the points per minute, 0.84 for the season, 0.72 or 0.73. We'll round it up over the last three. So I don't love Wagner, but I think there's just opportunity there given the leverage score.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense to me. By the way, interesting news. I know this doesn't impact tonight's DFS slate, but Klay Thompson expected to return in January. I think that was more or less expected, but still pretty cool to see nonetheless. Happy to have Klay finally potentially getting back in the mix soon. So I am rerunning my lineups right now and just kind of curious. I have no sort of real expectation. I have no clue what I'm going to be getting to at this point. Lots of bucks. So, it's funny. I'd said before about DeMarcus Cousins that he was not somebody that I was going to expect for more minutes, given that there was no Chris Middleton, but there are a couple extra shots to go around. And it does appear that I'm getting to a pretty healthy amount of DeMarcus Cousins. My most roster players right now are Drew Holiday and DeMarcus Cousins on DraftKings. And this is more to do with just the cheap price point for DeMarcus Cousins and how good of a points per minute fantasy producer is. You get 20 minutes of DeMarcus Cousins with these guys out for Milwaukee. That could very well be 25 to 30 fantasy points at his cheap price point. That is something that I am certainly interested in.
Yeah, he's been near the top of the board all day long at 3,100 on the DK slate. He's been 20+% optimal all day, and the boom score probability on him is massive. Just to speak to the fantasy point per minute, 0.99 fantasy points per minute this year. He was a 127 last year, and we've seen him be upward of that in his career. So for 3,100, yeah, if you're getting 20+ minutes out of Boogie Cousins here, it's absolutely a smash spot. in just 21 minutes that he's played this season with Giannis, Middleton, and Bobby Portis off the court, he's second on the team with a 33.3% usage percentage, trailing Drew's 44.5% with those three off. Drew's number comes in 50 minutes. Jordan Nwora has played the most without the three at 102 minutes, and he's third on the team in usage at 28.6%.
All right. Another super chat here from Robert. We appreciate all you guys asking your questions. Andrew Wiggins at 6,100 DK GPP versus Wagner versus Barnes versus Buddy Hield. I have the most exposure to Buddy Hield of those guys. So just to answer, Wiggins, Wagner, Barnes, Buddy Hield. Which of those guys do you like the most?
It's probably Buddy in terms of who I would expect to have the best fantasy score for us at the end of the day. But I do really like the idea of, if you're spending that money and if you've got the extra money to go from Buddy Hield to Franz Wagner and you're building in some of these other chalky guys, you can get pretty differentiated just by putting Franz Wagner into that lineup. But it depends very, very much at 6,200 versus 51 for Buddy Hield. What are you doing to get to that salary savings? What else are you taking out of that lineup? So I think those two would be the top of the board. I never like getting to what's his face from Golden State, Andrew Wiggins. That's how much I
what's his face?
I hold him in. Yeah, good old what's his face. So I never really get to Wiggins. He's just not a player I get very much in my lineups. He's not a player I ever go out of my way for. So really these other two are the ones that are interesting to me. And it's a salary and leverage driven decision for me.
All right, fair enough. I have no issues with that at all. And anything else you want to talk about from forward position? I'm just looking through my exposures right now to see if there's anybody that I'm getting to now that perhaps we didn't mention before from a forward standpoint. That's at least important. I guess we could talk about Harrison Barnes here. There are so many guys who are listed as questionable for the Kings, and I know that Harrison Barnes has struggled as of late, but there's no De'Aaron Fox in the picture. If we see Tyrese Halliburton ruled out later also, Harrison Barnes could really have a big game. So as it stands right now, if everybody was in, I wouldn't feel quite as good about Barnes, but just the potential that somebody gets ruled out, I'm going to like Harrison Barnes a lot. So I want him saving some spots in my lineup. How are you approaching Harrison Barnes?
I have no issues with that. He's on the board for sure. He's a little bit less expensive than Wagner. So if you're making that pivot from Hield, maybe you can go to that one instead of the Wagner one, talking about guys on the same team. So you're pivoting in directly the same situation for a little bit less small forward and power forward eligibility. So you get a little bit of a different positional flex with him as well. So no issues with it. Just a guy who, on a production basis, 0.9 fantasy points per minute for the season. He was a 0.84 producer last year on a lot less usage. So it's kind of interesting that he's gone down, only gone up a little bit from 0.84 to 0.9 with getting 20.1% usage this season. Over the last 3.77 fantasy points per minute. I don't love getting to Harrison Barnes in a lot of situations, but I would take shares of him in this one.
Yeah, and the key is just look at who's active for the Kings today. It's a lot of guys out and potential for more guys to get ruled out in more minutes. Actually, here's one forward that we haven't mentioned yet, and it's an important one, so we should be mentioning him. Wendell Carter Jr. for the Orlando Magic. Once again, just so many guys out for Orlando. He's one of the only regular players from that isn't in the lineup. To me, he's just the more expensive version of Chuma Okiki. I love getting to both of them, but Wendell Carter Jr. going to be popular. Don't care. Playing him, FanDuel, DraftKings, good chalk in my opinion. Do you agree that he's good chalk?
Yeah, absolutely. 1.06 fantasy points per minute for the season, 1.05 last year. So he's been right around what we expect him to be. 0.94 or 0.95 over the last three, but I'm not going to sweat that for 7,000 power forward and center eligible on FanDuel, 6,900 power forward center on DK. Absolutely. Smash spot. He's coming up nearly 30% optimal on both sites. A lot of weight on him, but it's worthwhile. It's good chalk.
All right. Anything else from the forward position that we should be mentioning? Any last calls? If not, we could talk about the centers before we get to lock.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron James is probably at least worth mentioning his name, super duper star, and definitely projected for a nice night in terms of the median projection. He's come down in his probability marks over the course of the afternoon with some of the values emerging, some of the shape of the slate changing, but I'm always happy to take shares of LeBron where I can get him. A guy who's been performing out of his mind for most of the season, Miles Bridges, has really not been discussed on any show that I've heard today, so I want to throw his name out there since I just spotted it. Going off under 5% owned on both sites and could certainly deliver value, 7,700 on DK, 8,400 on FanDuel, much more aggressive price over there, but I like him on both sites. I think I like him a lot on the DK slate now that I'm looking at it for 7,700 though.
I would have liked him potentially if LaMelo Ball wasn't returning from injury. I just think we have the situation, or returning from COVID.
That's a good call.
We just had the situation with the Hornets where they had to play these guys 40 plus minutes every single night. And not only is that minutes workload going to go down just because they're getting guys back from COVID, PJ Washington's back, LaMelo Ball's back, but I also wonder if it's a situation they just look at Miles Bridges and say, hey, we ran you into the ground over a course of a week and a half. We've got Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball, PJ Washington. Now let's ease up on you a little bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of those guys, Kelly Oubre, Miles Bridges, just play a few less minutes than they were even earlier in the season, just because of how hard they were worked. Let's jump over to the centers now. And I mentioned my thoughts on DeMarcus Cousins before. He's my favorite value play right now on DraftKings. You mentioned the possibility that maybe they lean on him for more minutes with Middleton out, just looking to get more scoring on the court. How do you feel about him on DK and FanDuel relative to his salary?
He's a go-to option. I think he's a foundational piece on the DK slate. That said, it does look like Robin Lopez at the same price has caught up in some of our metrics since my last update here. So similarly optimal, similar boom score probability for good old Robin Lopez in a longer minutes projection. That's with a 22-minute projection on Boogie and a 27, and I'm probably an update or two behind. But I think those are probably still around accurate. So that's interesting. If we get Boogie for a couple additional minutes than what Alex has him projected for, and it might not just be because of Chris Middleton, it might just be, we had him projected at 22 and he saw 25, 26. You never know where that could potentially go. I think there's just massive appeal in getting to Boogie Cousins. Like I said before, 1.27 fantasy point per minute guy last season should not be ignored. We're talking about 0.99 this year versus 0.87 for Robin Lopez. I like Boogie Cousins better than Robin Lopez in this situation, and Lopez is only there by comparison because he's got a much bigger minutes projection. So for me, it's Boogie Cousins. That would be the way I would go. A lot of the slate's going to be there, but it's not like people are sleeping on the Robin Lopez play. So if I'm not spending up to go to a Nikola Jokic or Anthony Davis, let's say at the center spot, I'm probably booking one of these values, and more frequently it'll be the Boogie Cousins.
Yeah, and I have 15% of Robin Lopez. Boogie's in more than half my lineup, so that is where I stand for both those guys today. Both of them, no points per dollar, no issue, but I prefer DeMarcus Cousins. A couple more super chats to get here. First from Gabe Games. Thank you for all your help, guys. Thank you for the super chat. We appreciate you. Kyle Anderson, Harrison Barnes, or Franz Wagner on FanDuel. I say Harrison Barnes for now, especially just because of the potential that we get extra guys out. Kyle Anderson would be a no for me, so I assume this is probably going to be between Barnes and Franz Wagner for you, Terry. Who do you like of those guys the most?
The other one wasn't really on the board. Let me jump back to the forward spot. Harrison Barnes, -8 leverage. I don't love on that one, but where the hell is Franz? Oh, there he is, all the way up at the top. Yeah, Franz Wagner pushing 40% ownership. So you're taking, even at -8 leverage on Harrison Barnes, you are taking a lot of ownership off the top. He's projected at 28.1. So you're talking about a lot of ownership to come down from there. I think I'm with you on that play. I think I could go to Barnes in that situation.
And don't forget, too, that those numbers are going to change if something like Tyrese Halliburton gets ruled out. And that's something that I also like trying to capture the upside on. From Devin RJJ, Powell or Wiggins on Yahoo. Well, there we go. Terry, you had just said before, you don't even remember the guy's name. You want nothing to do with Andrew Wiggins. He's the answer for me in these two. I prefer Wiggins to Powell, but how do you feel? Do you feel differently? Am I going to make you tell somebody to play Andrew Wiggins after what you said about him before?
That was for Yahoo?
Yes.
Let's see if I can get away with it. I can get away with it. Norm Powell, 18.06 boom score probability on the Yahoo slate. Andrew Wiggins, 17.18. Powell's a little bit more owned. They're projected similarly. I just prefer going to Powell. They're priced similarly. If you've got the extra dollar, I'd rather go to Powell. It's a pacier game. It was a high projected game. So I prefer that spot to the Golden State Boston game, just kind of on virtue of what the game shape is like and that I don't like Andrew Wiggins.
Fair enough. All right, so let's get over to the centers. I know we're kind of running short on time here. Such is the way. The shows go so fast when players starts get rolled out. Here's the good news, though. I think I've already hit on a lot of the centers that are important to me in terms of guys with power forward center eligibility. DeMarcus Cousins, Wendell Carter Jr. We talked about Robin Lopez. You mentioned Anthony Davis. I think at least on DK at his reduced price tag, he's certainly appealing, even though I don't like him that much. We have Westbrook, LeBron, and AD all active. One guy that we haven't talked about yet, Karl Anthony Towns. I think he's being a little bit overlooked by the field. There's no Anthony Edwards for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think D'Lo and Towns should both play massive roles on offense. Do you like Towns today, or is there a different pay-up option at center that stands out to you?
I always like Karl Anthony Towns. I just think that if I'm going to that price tier on the center spot, I might go all the way up to Nikola Jokic. I just think that the point per minute for Jokic shouldn't be ignored, even at these ridiculously high prices. And you can see that in the optimal rate. You can see that in the boom score probabilities that we've got Jokic on both sites at a much higher price, still coming in more optimal, higher boom score probabilities. So it's really, really interesting when we dig into the center spot today with all the value and then guys like Cat getting completely ignored at that price tier. I do like to get to it in terms of he's going to be owned around 13% on DK, around 10% on FanDuel. It's just a situation that I think I have to force instead of it coming up naturally. And I don't like messing with things too much, but for a player like Cat, who puts up 1.25 fantasy points per minute, has been at 1.27 over the last 3, I'm always happy to take shares of him, and I think it's worth pushing the extra shares of him. I just don't want to do it where I'm sacrificing my Jokic shares. So it's kind of a weird give and take between those guys at the pay-up spot for center today.
Yep. I don't have an issue with getting to Jokic, obviously, but it's just overall and by the way, Jokic has been like a cheat code for DFS recently because people have not been playing him nearly as much as they should. He just goes out and threatens for a triple-double every night. And there was also, if I could pull this up on Jokic, not necessarily DFS relevant, but I feel like we've hit on all of the guys that are important for the center position. So in the minutes that Jokic has played this year, Denver has outscored their opponents at the equivalent of being a 67-win team. When Jokic is off the court, the Nuggets on pace to win 7 games at the rate that they get outscored. So a 60-win swing is what Jokic has been worth to them when he's on or off the court. Any other centers that really stand out to you? Yeah. That's bananas.
I think just on a guy I mentioned earlier, he's fortunately got power forward eligibility on both sites. Triple J is always interesting to me, and it's another guy playing in that Memphis-Sacramento game toward the end of the night. So a guy that you can kind of build into a lineup if you decide to get off of him or things change, you can certainly get off of him. But I definitely want to target some shares of him. He's owned somewhat efficiently on both sites, but he's not highly owned on the DK slate, under 10% ownership. I think there's a reason to go to him a little bit there, despite a boom score probability and optimal lineup rate that are lower by comparison across sites because he's cheaper on FanDuel. Wendell Carter Jr. definitely warrants mentioning again off the top of the board here. And then like Yusuf Nurkic, if I had a few shares, I'd be okay with it. I just hate that he's basically doubling up his ownership on the FanDuel slate in terms of the leverage score. So I don't love that spot. I would look to undercut the field. If I was around 5 to 10%, I'd be happy rather than the 26% that the field is projected for on the FanDuel slate. Not as relevant on DK, but a lot less concerning in the ownership. So I would more happily take shares of Yusuf Nurkic on the DK slate, despite the fact that he's a little bit less powerful over there, let's say.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of slates where I've projected Nurkic fairly well this year, but here's the issue. Chauncey Billups just doesn't play in big minutes. And no matter how many guys are out for the Portland Trailblazers, we've just seen too many slates where he just doesn't play as much. Sure, they had an overtime game a couple of games ago where he got extended minutes. In general, though, there's just been a lot of games where he's played under 30 minutes, and that kind of caps his upside. He is going to look a little bit different on Yahoo, which we're going to talk about in the next 30 minutes. The main slate locks in a minute. You guys shouldn't be going anywhere because Terry and I are going to be sticking around for the next 30 minutes talking about the Yahoo slate. And the Yahoo slate, to acquiesce to our show schedule, their slate locks at 7:30, not the 7 o'clock start time. So you don't have to worry about that stupid Magic Heat game if you're playing over on Yahoo. So stick around and listen to us talk about Yahoo. But even if you are somebody who just plays on DraftKings, FanDuel, if you're looking for us to talk about basketball in general, good news. Players are most likely going to get scratched. There's going to be weird lineups. Stuff is going to happen. Terry and I will be here to break it down over the next 30 minutes. Terry, any closing thoughts to the center position before we head into lock and kick it over to Yahoo?
Oh, good luck. Robert Williams is a guy we didn't really bring up on this slate. And 5,300 on FanDuel, 4,800 on DK. Could definitely play a role, but he's not really popping to a lot of our probability marks. He just kind of is who he is on this slate. So I was expecting him to be a little bit more relevant earlier in the day. That said, on FanDuel, nice little leverage score, 12% optimal, 6% owned. So as a lowish owned kind of a play, he's certainly interesting.
We did get a super chat from Orion. This came in really late, so sorry that we weren't able to answer it right in time. But he asked, is it dumb to fade this entire first game on FanDuel GPP? That would fall in the category of dumb to me. I would not want to have zero exposure to this Magic Heat game, considering all the guys that are out for the Magic.
Yeah, there's just too much value in that game to say I'm taking it off the board entirely. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think even if I'm only building one lineup, I think I'm including a couple pieces from that game.
Yep, I am on the same page as you. Actually, in fact, kind of curious, do I have any lineups that have no Magic players today?
That would
maybe a couple. I might have at least one Magic player in every single lineup today, whether it's Okiki or Wendell Carter Jr., Robin Lopez. I don't know if I have any without any of these guys. Did you play any of the really shitty Magic players? I mean, I guess all of them kind of fall into that category, but
it depends on which one you mean. Yeah. I mean, is Robin Lopez one of the good ones or the shitty ones?
Fair enough. I guess Robin Lopez, that's actually bad. Robin Lopez falls into the category of one of the good Orlando players in the context of this slate, which is a little problematic. So, all right, I rescind my question because I realized the error of my ways. I've got I was going to say, which game should I put on? Because that's usually something that I do here is I ask people which game I should put on, but there's only one to talk about. So it's going to be the game that goes on my second screen is the Heat Magic game, the showdown in Florida that everybody's been waiting on with bated breath. But let's talk about the Yahoo slate right now. And if you guys missed me talking about it before, we do have a really good deal with Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, something that's really given Terry a lot of extra work. And if you guys want to keep Terry in business, you guys want to see Terry on shows, other than liking this video, subscribing to the YouTube channel, that helps a whole lot. You just want to be signing up for Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, because when you do, using the link in the description box below, you get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, something that Terry has to set up. You guys, when you email support, it's Terry who answers you. So anything you ever have issues with, you go to support. It's either Terry or News God that answers you. But let's keep Terry.
A couple of the guys on the team too. We'll give full credit to everybody. Nolan and Nathan help out a little bit on the back end there as well. So want to make sure those guys get a little bit of credit there. Sorry to jump on your plug.
Terry or News God are going to be answering your emails. And that's why you want to keep these guys busy. You know them. Sign up for Yahoo using the link in the description box below. Get your 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Also, if you sign up using the promo code XMIS100, get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. So, all right, Terry, let's talk about Yahoo. And do you have the Yahoo slate pulled up now?
I do.
So first question I want to ask you is, looking at the Yahoo slate, what looks vastly different for you just in terms of players that stand out? So who's a player that looks really good to you on Yahoo that maybe didn't on FanDuel or DraftKings?
So, I mean, since we're starting at 7:30, there is the big obvious meatball that you don't have that Miami-Orlando game and all that crazy value on this slate at all. So that becomes immediately interesting. I think it's definitely noteworthy that Nikola Jokic is $9 more expensive than the next highest player, who's LeBron James. There's a little bit of a drop off from James to Curry, Tatum, LaMelo, all priced pretty similarly on this slate. AD is kind of cheap at 43. He's underneath all those guys. So I think there's, at the very top of the board, there are some affordable star end kind of players. Dame Lillard also jumps out at 37. He was a guy who was kind of interesting for cheap prices on the other ones. And then you get some guys who are priced up into strange territory by comparison. Like Miles Bridges, I'd be a lot less interested in. I brought him up at the end of the slate for the discussion for the other slates at 34. I think he's a lot less interesting. I mean, for $8 more, you're at DeJounte Murray, Anthony Davis. So it's just a different shape to the slate given where these prices fall. And then we've got a bunch of $10 values to work with. So you can build in all sorts of value still from like that Milwaukee game, from Sacramento. There's a bunch of guys. So there's a lot of cheap plays and a lot of talented stars at the top that you can work into lineups here.
Yep, I think that all totally makes sense. And then obviously the biggest thing that makes a difference over on Yahoo, we don't have the Orlando players to choose from. We were just talking about before we got that super chat, would you guys consider fading the Orlando players on FanDuel? And I said, no, you don't have a choice on Yahoo. It's not on the slate. So just the fact that you're taking guys like Chuma Okiki, Wendell Carter Jr., potentially some Robin Lopez exposure, you can't go to those guys anymore. So as a result, I look at the lineup build I have right now. I'm getting to a ton of Milwaukee Bucks. I'm getting to a ton of Sacramento Kings. And then also somebody like Pat Connaughton. I know you had said before that you were a little hesitant to roster him at his more elevated price points on FanDuel and DK. He's $16 on Yahoo. And considering the injury situation for the Bucks today, guys are out. No Giannis, no Chris Middleton. I get to a lot of Pat Connaughton based on that. So Pat Connaughton, is he somebody you look at differently on Yahoo?
Yeah, for sure. I think you have to. He's one of the more relevant players by boom score probability. If we're going by that metric, he's 19th overall at any position, and he's the, let's say, like fourth or fifth cheapest guy going down that list down to him from the top of boom score probability at $16. So there's a couple guys, $13, $10 in here, but positionally for what he can give you on the court for the minutes that we expect him to play, got him projected around 34 minutes. There's definitely opportunity for Connaughton to have a nice performance here for us.
One thing I think is really funny is I'm looking at, because I'm waiting for the Magic Heat game to start so I could pull that up on my second screen. It hasn't started yet. There are so many. So the NBA, they do this kind of like marketing thing where it's like key players of the game to watch out for. Most of the players are out. They've listed here. So they have for leaders for the Heat and the Magic, it's Cole Anthony and Tyler Hero. Neither of them are playing today. Other ones that stand out to me as I scroll through, obviously Giannis for the Bucks. He's not playing today. You go down to the bottom. We've got Kings Grizzlies. Desmond Bane, who they have as a leader for the Grizzlies. Okay, whatever. And then De'Aaron Fox on their side. He isn't playing. So it is a mess with all of this stuff right now.
Good to know the actual NBA or the network or whatever that came from at some point during the day just said, screw it. We're just not gonna update this stuff while we're all grinding here and working hard and paying attention to the news.
Yeah, no, they're like, hey, this was up on the screen early in the day. What could possibly change? There's nothing that could ever go wrong with this. Let's go position by position on Yahoo. And I have a build made for here. And I'm curious to see which guys it is that you're getting to the most at each position, Terry. And just starting with some of the guards here, looking at the point guard position, Drew Holiday at only $34. I find that to be an unavoidable price tag. We were talking about his fantasy production earlier. When you take Giannis and Middleton off the court, over 50 fantasy points per 36 minutes. I have him projected for upper 40s fantasy points staying this matchup against the Pelicans. He is my most exposed player in my current build on Yahoo at $34. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Absolutely. I actually haven't run a full crunch here for the Yahoo slate, so I'm going to do that in the background while we're talking. But I mean, just from the top of the board, nearly a 50% boom score probability with no Middleton now on top of everything else. We saw the usage rate that I cited before from Wowie was over 40% in the very limited sample of minutes. It was like 50 and change minutes without Portis, Giannis, and Middleton on the court. But there's going to be a ton for Drew Holiday to do. We've got him projected at 35 minutes. I think it is easily viable that he plays upward of that and delivers a monster game here. Nearly 50% boom score and owned only around 33% on the Yahoo slate. That's a smash spot to me.
Yeah, and that's really, I'm looking at Drew Holiday, my most exposed player overall in the build I have right now. I think he is the best play to get to at $34 on Yahoo, especially when we don't have that first game to consider. One thing that is different about my builds on Yahoo as compared to sites like FanDuel and DraftKings. So Steph Curry, this is actually kind of an in-between. Steph Curry, I liked him a lot on FanDuel at his price point. Didn't like him very much at all on DK. Kind of in between the two takes over on Yahoo at the $45 salary. To me, he looks more like a guy who, if you have the salary, pay up for him. But the number one most rostered pay up option point guard position for me, Damian Lillard at $37. Not somebody I've really thought of all that much of on FanDuel or DraftKings. But Lillard looks pretty solid to me here. In terms of pay-up option point guard, Lillard, Curry, how do you feel about those guys?
I love both players in a vacuum, and the pivot is basically around the idea of paying 37 for Lillard or 45 for Curry. You get a nice discount on the ownership. Curry's projected for about 5 percentage points less ownership than Lillard. So if you've got the money, I think I would probably just chase that ownership differential and spend up to get to Curry. But I think Lillard for $37 over here, 28.5% boom score probability, perfectly acceptable. And if we're calling leverage on this slate, since we don't have a leverage column on the tool yet, so if we're calling leverage just boom score versus ownership, we've got a nice little positive leverage situation there on him. So it's definitely something that you can monitor and take a look at if the ownership changes over the next couple minutes. But right now, for me, that's Curry, just based on where that ownership comes down.
All right, and now let's look at some of the more possible contrarian options at point guard on Yahoo. And keep in mind also that one less game to talk about. So the ownership may be a little more concentrated here when we're looking at Yahoo. Is there anybody who's not popular that you think does make for a good tournament play?
If we're saying not popular, let's take a look here. DeJounte Murray is a guy that I feel like I cite on every time you and I do a show together, but less than 5% ownership on this side as well, coming up 14% optimal. It's half the optimal rate that we were seeing for Steph Curry and Damian Lillard for the same pricing. So I don't love it, but if we're just talking purely low owned guys, I think he makes sense. I think from a totally different pricing tier at $21, Marcus Smart for under 10% ownership definitely makes some sense. We talked about all the situational opportunity that's been created in that Boston rotation. So you can definitely get value from him. And that's probably the better price point across the three sites, grabbing some Marcus Smart at $21. And my guy that I wrote up and mentioned during the show, but said on the other sites, I kind of lost him a little bit in the shuffle just with all the value and then all the star plays that emerged. Tyus Jones still looks a little bit interesting. Only 14.8%, gets back into the mix. Like, would I rather have Tyus Jones at 14.8% ownership or Steph Curry at 16.4? Well, that's Steph Curry, but Steph Curry costs 45 where Tyus Jones only costs 18. So that's a spot that I'm interested in as well for a value play.
Is this Magic Heat game starting anytime soon? Because right now I'm still just looking at a blank screen over on my monitor over here. So
waiting for players to arrive, introduce themselves to one another. You know,
I just get terrified. I'm like, what if they just don't play this stupid game? And then I got exposure. Oh, there we go. All right, it's underway now. So there we go. Just sometimes all you have to do is ask. If you ask politely, then they will acquiesce and start the game for you. Let's talk about the shooting guard position now. And the Kings situation is going to have a massive influence here. We've got Tyrese Halliburton at only $24. And that's a salary with Tyrese Halliburton that would make him one of the best plays on the obvious slate, without a doubt, considering the players out for them. But how do you approach Tyrese Halliburton at $24 on Yahoo, considering that game we're now a couple hours out from it starting and there's been no updates on him?
Yeah, you don't love the situation, but it's definitely standing out in terms of price, in terms of the potential production. He's a 0.93 fantasy point per minute producer on just 15.5% usage. It's a situation where we're kind of targeting this game for some pace, some scoring potential. We're playing a lot of guys from this game. And I think there's other spots to go in this game, right? So if he scratches, you can always turn those into Buddy Hield shares, and Buddy's ridiculously owned. He's 40% owned, but you can move those over if you need to, going down from $24 to $17. So there's in-game pivots that we can make. So given that, I'm fine with rostering a bunch of shares of Halliburton here, especially given the fact that he's projected for less than 10% ownership now, 32.8% boom score probability on the slate. There's every reason to expect if he plays, he's going to smash through that $24 price. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, and that's the thing here is Tyrese Halliburton going to play? If I have a ton of Halliburton right now, by the way, across all sites, am I going to have to pivot off or not? That remains to be seen. But Halliburton, to me, if he plays, really important play. If he's out, Buddy Hield, we've already talked a whole bunch about Buddy Hield today. He's $17 on Yahoo. That would make him an even better value play than where he's priced on FanDuel or DraftKings. We see Buddy Hield priced way down due to some of his lack of minutes, lack of strong performances as of late. Buddy Hield, to me, at $17 is the best shooting guard play on all of Yahoo.
Yeah, and it's reflected in the ownership, 40% owned. But like I was just saying, if you do play a lot of Halliburton, you've got that natural in same game and same situation pivot for $7 less if Halliburton does scratch. And it's getting to Hield with an inflated value at that point because there would be no Halliburton. So absolutely. Even with Halliburton on the court, I think he's a very strong play. And if you lose Halliburton, I think he just goes up in value at that $17 price. So definitely something you can target. You can build in aggressively. You don't really need to sweat the ownership because there's different ways to go. And it's just such a low price for the opportunity that it's definitely worth attacking. 0.92 fantasy points per minute over the last three, only 19.7 in 29 minutes of the last time out, 0.88 for the season. So I think he's worth going to. I would maybe undercut the field a little bit in a situation where Halliburton was in. Maybe I don't want 40% of them. Maybe I'm around 25, 30%, but I think it's a spectacular play regardless. So it's just a situation where maybe if I'm trying to get away from a little bit of weight at one position, maybe that is one that I do if Halliburton goes. But with no Halliburton or with the question mark there, definitely a spot you can consider.
This Magic Kings game is just absolutely brutal to watch. So we had Robin Lopez with his patented hook shot that he barely touched any of the rim on a couple possessions ago. And then we got ISO PJ Tucker came down the other end and ended up getting fouled. Also, shout out to, we do have a Mark James shouted this out in our YouTube chat. We do have a 2K Awesemo free roll that's being run over on Yahoo. So if you guys are looking to potentially win some free money, check out the free roll we have over at Yahoo. That's also a good way to pick up some value. As for other shooting guards, I like D'Angelo Russell for basically the same reasons I like him everywhere else today. There's no Anthony Edwards for the Timberwolves. D'Angelo Russell is going to pick up a lot of the usage. So D'Angelo Russell is somebody who's really appealing to me. We've got him at $28 on Yahoo, also woefully underpriced. These are all guys that we've talked about across other slates. Is there somebody at the shooting guard position that's not popular, Terry, that stands out to you?
I was actually just jumping over to my Yahoo lineup in that free roll contest. I'm glad you mentioned that because I hadn't looked at that since I put Damian Mitchell into it, and he isn't playing tonight. So I got to make some changes over there. But yeah, let's see for unpopular shooting guards. I mean, Halliburton has a very low ownership projection, so we got to throw him into that bucket. And then you're really talking about a mix of guys like, if we're calling 16% on Grayson Allen, low ownership at $12, I think there's certainly value there. 24.8% optimal lineup appearance, or excuse me, boom score probability. But a 0.65 fantasy point per minute rate over the last 3.74 for the season. You're not going to a monster point per minute performer, but for the $12, I don't think he's got to be a monster for you in that situation. So I don't mind some value there from Allen. If you want to talk about some pay up type guys, $35 for Brandon Ingram, $34 for Donovan Mitchell, two guys we haven't really talked about across any of these slates, both coming up amongst the top boom score probabilities on the Yahoo slate and not getting a ton of ownership, a little bit above 10% for Ingram, a little bit above 15% for Donovan Mitchell. So I like going to those guys before I think I like going to guys like Will Barton, Desmond Bane, Derek White, the next few guys on the list by boom score here, even though the other guys are lower owned. I would rather figure out a way to get to the guys that are just better players in that situation, I think.
Yep, I think that is totally sensible. I have no issues with that. And we can move over to the small forward position, where I think there are some different guys here to talk about that we haven't talked about on other sites. Harrison Barnes is somebody who we talked about the potential upside for him. If those Kings guys are out, I don't think we need to reiterate that. We talked about Pat Connaughton at the top of this, but then there's other guys over on Yahoo. Andrew Wiggins at only $22. I know that Terry hates Andrew Wiggins, but I'm going to make him say something nice about Wiggins here. No Jordan Poole. There's extra usage to go around in the Warriors starting lineup. Surely you have some interest in Andrew Wiggins, who shall not be named at $22 on Yahoo.
It's actually funny. He is in this Yahoo lineup that I built earlier today.
Yeah.
So yes, I do begrudgingly at $22. I guess that's my breaking point. $22 for Andrew Wiggins does look pretty nice here on the Yahoo slate. 19% boom score probability projected over 31 median points, 15% ownership. So there's definitely good reason to go to him there. He's a lower mid-range kind of a play on this slate. Definitely somebody you can get to. Probably like him a little bit better going back to that question for him versus Norm Powell. He's slightly edges out Norm Powell by boom score on this site. He's $1 less expensive. He has owned 5 percentage points more. So maybe it's a situation where based on ownership, you can make that pivot. But I do like Andrew Wiggins a little bit on this slate. Begrudging.
There we go. I made you say something nice about him. Somebody else who I like a decent amount over on Yahoo that I also liked for FanDuel and DraftKings purposes, got Jason Tatum, $45 on Yahoo. We've got all of those players who are out today for the Golden State Warriors. I do not find it difficult to pay up for Jason Tatum. And the small forward position may be a little more loaded on Yahoo than it is on other sites. Also, you look at, DK, for instance, we get multi-position eligibility out of Tatum. You can play him in multiple spots. I still like him a whole bunch at $45 on Yahoo. But in terms of pay-up options, where does he fit into the picture for you?
Yeah, I think he makes a ton of sense. He stands as the top pay up option at the small forward spot by a pretty wide margin, right? He's priced $20-ish higher than everybody else at the position. Kelly Oubre priced at $27. Everybody else $20. Oh no, excuse me. Gordon Hayward also $30. But basically everybody else is a lot of money less than he is. So I think it makes some sense to differentiate by paying up to one of the better players on the slate, a guy with plenty to do in a depleted rotation. Gave us 60 fantasy points. That's using FanDuel points. 60 the last time out in 38 minutes, 1.32 over the last 3 games, 1.22 for the season. Love Jason Hayward in most situations. I wouldn't shy away from him here for $45.
By the way, some quick starts for guys in the Orlando game, most notably Chuma Okiki. In the first 4 minutes of the game, he has 3 points, a rebound, an assist, and a steal. And Robin Lopez, 4 points, 2 assists, and 4 minutes or now 5 minutes for Robin Lopez. So he actually made a couple of those hook shots after he nearly airballed that other one. So he has come back with a vengeance. Anything else at the small forward position here that we've glanced over that we should be talking about?
A lot of mix and match type parts, right? Like I wouldn't begrudge anybody shares of like Dylan Brooks, Josh Hart, these guys that just kind of rank similarly by our boom score metric, but weren't like incredibly interesting on any of these other slates. They're fairly priced in those low 20s price range. I have no problems with getting any of them, but I don't think they'd naturally find their way into a lot of lineups as I'm crunching lineups, but they're at least worth mentioning. They're kind of mix and match type pieces.
Yep. I'm looking at the small forward position and somebody like Nasir Little at $10. That's something that makes a little bit of sense to me. So somebody in chat mentioned Cam Reddish. I'm not really interested in Cam Reddish at $10. But moving over to the power forward position, here's somebody that I really like as a value play in Yahoo that I did not get to on FanDuel or DraftKings. That is Larry Nance Jr. He has been starting and playing bigger minutes for the Portland Trailblazers as of late. And those minutes have been getting ramped up. So last 3 games for Larry Nance Jr., 26 minutes, 28 minutes, 31 minutes. I expect him to once again play somewhere in that neighborhood of 30 minutes. With that in mind, $13 for Larry Nance Jr. seems like a steal to me. Am I missing anything?
No, makes a lot of sense to me. He's top of the board in terms of our boom score probability. He's going to be owned on the slate. He's not a secret 29% ownership at that price, but I think it's just kind of a foundational piece that you can build into a lineup, helps you buy players like LeBron if you wanted to go there or, any other direction. So definitely a viable play. 0.94 fantasy points per minute over the last 3, 0.86 for the season. Definitely a guy who could go pop on you as well. 18.5 fantasy points in 31 minutes the last time out. So you do run that risk, but I think it's definitely viable. And and a guy that wasn't really on the radar on other slates. So maybe if you just think about the public building lineups in terms of what they hear for other sites, because Yahoo doesn't get talked about quite as much across the industry, maybe our ownership projection runs a little high on that value play, and maybe you get them a little bit more efficient than that. So I do like that play. It makes a lot of sense. In a crunch of 376 lineups that I just dashed off the top with no changes, no randomness, he came up 68.4% of the time across those lineups. So he's very, very relevant in terms of just the pure optimal pre-lock optimal constructions.
Yeah, and a very, very specific number of lineups made there. 376, I believe you said the number was. That's any particular reason why that was the number?
That's exactly where I stopped the 1,000 lineup crunch when I said, all right, that's probably enough to talk.
Fair enough. I could appreciate that. Somebody else at the power forward position, power forward on Yahoo does seem to have some guys who are priced much differently than on FanDuel and DK. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been priced way up on FanDuel and DraftKings at this point, and for a good reason. He's been a usage monster ever since Ja Morant got hurt. Only $25 for Triple J over on Yahoo. Larry Nance is my favorite player at the position, but Jackson's the player I get to the second most. Was that the same for you in the crunch you made?
Yeah, he's coming up quite a bit as well in the crunch. I'll jump back over that, but I know I saw him on here, 42%. So he's coming up quite a bit. One of the more aggressive forwards on the board in terms of where that came up. He was also in my hand-built lineup that I built earlier in the day that I still need to figure out what I'm doing at the point guard spot for, but I definitely like him a lot on the Yahoo slate. He was a guy I mentioned on the other sites as well. I was trying to get to him and, figure out a good way to pay those. I think it was mid-6s for him on those sites. So here where he's at a bit of a discount from that rate, I'm happy to take my shares of them here. And that's another great thing that you can do when you're playing multiple sites. You can shop around for the best price on these different plays and make sure you're playing the guys where they make the most sense, where they're the most efficiently priced or most broken prices, I guess I should say, not efficient prices. So you want to be taking advantage of, you can get them a little bit cheaper on a slate like Yahoo.
Yep, totally agree. And I think that all makes sense. Jordan Noir is somebody I got to a decent amount at $11. I think he's a good value play across the industry considering the Bucks injury news. Power forward position. Same thing I asked about the other positions, Terry. Who is the contrarian option that stands out the most to you here?
Looking down the board a little ways, I mean, there's still question marks about whether he's going to play. I don't think he's been ruled out yet. Is Metu still in? We've got him projected at 22.7 minutes as my last one.
Him and Halliburton are both questionable.
Yeah, I knew he was a question mark. I didn't see whether he'd been ruled out or anything like that. I wanted to make sure I said that first, because we've got him projected for 0.8% ownership. So if you get any idea of an inkling that he's playing, he's a little bit of a value at $12 that you can kind of throw into the mix here. 10.4% boom score probability ranks him, let's call that 7th or 8th on the board overall. Above him, You mentioned Jordan Nwora for $11. I like that call quite a bit. Definitely interesting to me there, but he's pulling a little bit of ownership. Miles Bridges, who I brought up earlier in the other slates, and then I mentioned him at that $34 price, how that compares to some of the other star plays on the board. I think I would rather play star caliber players than go to 34 for Miles Bridges here, but the public feels that way as well. So if you want a differentiation piece and you say, all right, instead of spending 47 for LeBron, I'll spend 34 on Miles Bridges. I'll take a star play elsewhere and I'll get different from the field. Miles Bridges, 6.8% ownership is definitely viable in that situation, but it's a matter of how you're spending that money, how you're spending that salary difference. John Collins, to me, a little bit less interesting now that we know Clint Capella is definitely playing, but he's on the board there at $29. I just would probably rather get to other guys.
Yeah, I don't see any issues with anything you just said. Let's do a recap so far on what's going on in the games. The man who's got it going so far, Chuma Okiki. We've got Okiki. Quick start for him. He is up to 11 DraftKings points. 3 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal halfway through the first quarter. So he looks well on his way to a big game. Robin Lopez, 4 points, 2 assists, and a rebound. He's looking decent. Other than that, not too much going on. Gary Harris is in foul trouble. That could be something that ends up being a little bit problematic as the game goes on. But overall, we're looking at a pretty crappy basketball game. But those Orlando guys are so cheap that it looks like a few of them are going to get there anyway, just because of the overall status of the game. Now, looking at the center position, there's a few guys I've really liked at the position, just kind of like spreading out exposure to them. DeMarcus Cousins, Yusuf Nurkic, Nikola Jokic, Jonas Valanciunas at his price point over on Yahoo, Karl Anthony Towns. Those are the guys I've really liked building around at the center position. Is there any of those guys you disagree with, Terry, or is there anybody you would add to that mix as a core center play?
Nobody that I disagree with by any means. DeMarcus Cousins is the top option. With a bullet.
We've got news. Uh-oh. Starting at center for the Milwaukee Bucks. Boogie Cousins, DeMarcus Cousins starting at center today. Lock and load Boogie. Any lineups that don't have Boogie, play him. 100% DeMarcus Cousins for me today.
Yep, absolutely love it. Everything that I was just saying enthusiastically about him, just add some exclamation points. It's a smash spot. We had him at a 41.39% boom score probability, leading the Yahoo board at center for $10. Just fire away. He should be in every Yahoo lineup at $10 at the dead minimum. Same with DK.
Same for DK, same for FanDuel. I know that he isn't min price on FanDuel.
Yeah, but still,
I just don't care. You're playing all of the Boogie Cousins. Think about where Cousins was priced just a couple of years ago, and can he handle the same workload? No. Is he the same player? No. Still an excellent fantasy producer, though. Look at DeMarcus Cousins this year. He is playing 12.4 minutes per game, still scoring a fantasy point per minute last year. And this is in pretty small sample size. We've only seen 7 games out of Boogie. Last year, though, 17.4 minutes, 22.6 DraftKings points per game. If he's on the court, he scores fantasy points. DeMarcus Cousins, the best play on the slate now, in my opinion. And I understand that a lot of people are going to be rostering him, but hey, 32 minutes to go until that game locks, and maybe some people just don't make the swaps. They played a lot of players from the early games and don't have the swap ability to get on Boogie. Get Boogie into your lineups now. Very, very high priority. Cash games, tournaments everywhere. Play DeMarcus Cousins.
I tell you what, too, on the DK slate, that becomes super interesting because those Robin Lopez shares are already locked. So people aren't going to be able to pivot off of Robin Lopez onto Boogie at the same price. So I think maybe he doesn't see he's going to see a massive spike, but if 20% of the field is locked into Robin Lopez there, that's advantageous to switch everything possible to Boogie Cousins now.
Yeah, and once he's so cheap relative to what we normally see from him. But this is going to pinch some of the exposure I get to other centers. I'm not going to be able to prioritize guys like Jokic or Nurkic as much at this point because I need to have as much DeMarcus Cousins as possible. I'm curious to refresh our ownership to see if we've had any changes here. But the popularity of Boogie, I mean, he was projected for 33.6% on DK. On FanDuel, we had him at 20.3%. On Yahoo, Boogie at 32.4%. Should be way higher than that on all of those. Just is a lock play for me. Simple, 100% DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we were saying, it is a 1.27 fantasy points per minute player last season. And we've seen him be upward of that in his career. Like you said, he's not the same player as he used to be, but he's also not priced at like 9,000, 10,000 anymore. It's absolute lock, kind of a smash spot. I never like saying lock. I'm saying the word lock on this one.
And that is how we're going to finish the show. Thank you to Yahoo for sponsoring the show. Guys, this was a crazy slate, and all the more reason that you guys need to be subscribed to this YouTube channel. You need to be liking all the videos we do because we got everything covered. We've got MMA tomorrow. There's NHL, NBA. Check out all of that, and good luck. Have a good weekend.